23. Our first agenda item is administrative business, the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions regarding the consent agenda? Seeing none, would someone like to move it? Thank you, Suzanne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Helen. Suzanne, your vote?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Sorry, I was having audio problems. What are we voting on?
Consent agenda.
Abstain.
And I vote yes.
Can I make?
I'm here too, David.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Natalia.
Yes.
Okay.
So one comment, I think our policy is for overseas travel for us to approve it, I think a year ahead. We should check that.
I think it's 6 months.
Is it 6 months?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just, okay, never mind. I'm seeing 6 months. They're good.
Yeah.
We're happy. And the reason being, so that people know, is that kids can do some fundraising, try and raise money for themselves once they know a trip has been approved. So that's an important piece. Thank you.
Mariah, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a question on process. Just the cover sheet of these has a routing stamp or something on it. And it looks like there's a step that wasn't completed before it came to us. Do you see what I'm talking about?
No.
You don't see what I'm talking about? There's a routing thing. It says approval route, and then it goes teaching and learning, then superintendent, then school committee. And I see a teaching and learning sign off, but I don't see a superintendent sign off.
On those, Mariah, teaching and learning signs on my behalf as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So the practice doesn't match the routing?
Well, they actually come to me first and I approve and then send to teaching and learning for their approval. So it's just me not putting my signature on there, but I did approve them.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So now we will move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Guillory.
So good evening, everyone. I'm happy to give our superintendent's update for today, September 28th. We will look at a few community highlights, look at some of the school visits, share some staffing updates, talk through some important dates, and then get to our main feature, our spotlight on excellence. The Brookline Education Foundation will be honoring the 2023 Metzger Fellows at 5 p.m. Friday, September 29th in the Lincoln School Auditorium. The 23 Metzger Fellows are as follows. We have Hannah Bjornson from Lawrence School, Julia Magnan from BHS, Tim Hintz from Pierce School, Peter Sedlak from BHS, Brendan McCarthy from BHS, and then Jeanette Sargent from Baker School. The 23 Metzger Fellows will read their essays on the craft of teaching, followed by a reception with light refreshments. And again, congratulations to all the Metzger Fellows, and I look forward to hearing your presentations tomorrow evening. PSB has partnered with the Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth to hold a parent workshop, What Are You Puffing, Vaping, and Our Youth, October 25th, 2023 from 6 to 7:30 p.m. over Zoom. This workshop will focus on how to recognize vaping devices and products and the physical impact vaping has on the body. The speaker, Kobe Marshburn, has 20 years of experience working with youth and individuals with disabilities, as well as over 10 years expertise in the field of prevention services. As the father of 2 young children, he understands the importance of equipping youth, their parents, and their communities with the knowledge and skills to enable young people to become the best versions of themselves. The Brookline Public Department of Public Health will be holding flu clinics, again with our PSB nurses providing support as needed. The clinics are available to Brookline residents, students, and staff. The first one, or the next one up on the docket, is Wednesday, October 4th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m., and that's at Baker's School. We have one Sunday, October 15th from 9 to 12 at BHS Schlunz Gym, that's 115 Greenough. And then Tuesday, October 17th, 4:30 to 6:30 p.m., and that's at Florida Ruffin Ridley. And again, we'll continue announcing these and updating these when we also have our COVID vaccine. I've been busy with school visits, getting out into schools, checking on teaching and learning, and seeing all the exciting things happening in schools. So we've been out to Beep, Putterham, and Baker back on the 12th of September, visited Lawrence on the 14th of September, Driscoll the 15th, and it's exciting to see so much progress happening there on the building with Driscoll, and they are making a mad dash to get it ready for the students and faculty. Baker, September 20th. And then again, Driscoll and FRR on the 22nd. I was out at Heath Tuesday, and then visited Lincoln and Runkle Wednesday. And here you see some shots of Runkle Kindergarten in the upper left quadrant here. Students were getting ready for a movement break after having just done some work in foundations. And then I was able to catch quite a few of the performing arts over while I was visiting Heath School. So we have the band performing there, and for a middle school band, they were sounding pretty awesome. So it's very pleased with their progress there. Then a Heath chorus program, and then a guitar class there at Heath. So lots of exciting developments happening there in our performing arts. Upcoming, I have Beep tomorrow morning. We are going to visit, I think, Lynch and Beacon sites, and then I'll be at BHS midday tomorrow, and then Lawrence on Monday. We are welcoming Deb Bromfield, former Director of Student Services at Canton Public Schools, to support the Office of Student Services. She will support the Civil Rights Coordination, McKinney-Vento Home Hospital Coordination while we search for a permanent replacement for Dr. Lataz. Ms. Bromfield began her career in 1981 as a special education teacher and was the Director of Student Services at Canton Public Schools until 2020 when she retired. She lives here in Brookline with her husband and daughter. We are pleased to announce that Mr. Neil Gudka has joined PSB earlier this week as our new communications specialist. Mike Chan, as many of you may know, has gone back down to serve in the attendance office while he completes his master's in counseling. And so he's still in the district working with us, doing part-time work in the attendance office, but then also doing his internship hours over at Runkle, and I actually saw him this week when I was over there. Neil brings 4 years of experience in media, marketing, and communications. Originally from Mumbai, India, he has lived in Boston for the past 2 years. He recently completed his master's degree in digital media management from Northeastern, where he also worked as a student employee in multiple marketing and communications roles. We warmly welcome Neil to the PSB community. And before we get to our spotlight on excellence, we do want to highlight a few important dates. October 2nd is National Custodians Day. October 9th is Indigenous Peoples Day, and of course our schools are closed that day. And then the week of October 10th through 13th is National School Lunch Week. September 29th is the Mid-Autumn Festival, also known as Moon Festival or Moon Cake Festival. It's a traditional festival celebrated in Chinese culture. And then Sukkot is running from runs from September 29th through October 6th. The festival of Sukkot begins on Tishri, the 5th day after Yom Kippur. So with that, we will now shine our spotlight on excellence on our PSB Food Service, our Summer Eats program. Food Service operated the summer food service program this summer. Previously, they had operated seamless summer option under USDA waiver. Sasha Palmer, PSB Food Services Director, Rebecca Salguro, Sustainability Coordinator, Paige Haringa, PSB Food Services Assistant Director, Karen Murphy, PSB Food Services Trainer and Coordinator, and Monica, Mona Mona, I thought I was going to say it flawlessly. Saltalamakia, our PSB Food Services Assistant, joins us this evening. They will share some of the highlights of our first summer meals program. Without further ado, we turn the microphone over to Sasha Palmer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guillory, for the spotlight. And as I can see Donna on the screen, I want to say that Donna Odell, who is probably one of the hardest workers during the summer, she has been tasked with being the boots on the ground person for that summer program. It was our first year in operating under this program, and with that came a Department of Education review, or what we call an audit. And I will say that I know Donna went through that alone. she sat through it, and the feedback I got from Desi was that she was awesome. So thank you, Donna. I want to personally say thank you. You did a great job. We couldn't have done this summer without you. So thank you. So every year, the Summer Eats program basically started out of right after COVID, or right during the heights of COVID, when the wonderful school committee decided that they would fund food service department continuing to feed students while school was out. This was way before the USDA or the federal government or the state decided that they would compensate school departments for supplying or providing meals during COVID. So this started basically with school committee, and we appreciate the thoughtfulness and the work and that they put behind the program. We saw how successful it was during that time, and we also saw the need to have such a program running in the district. And we continued to seek funding even after DESE, the USDA and the State Department waivers ended. And so we applied for what is called Summer Food Service Program. With that, we qualify a small section of the district qualifies based on the census, the national census. This now qualifies us. It took some work, it took some a lot of understanding of the summer program, but we did get qualified, and now we're qualified to operate for the next 5 years. So that is a huge accomplishment. That is something that I protect because it's very important to have this program running during the summer. So we had a lot of fun and excitement. Our goal is always to provide meals for kids during the summer, because I am a champion and a believer that not because school is out means that kids shouldn't have access to the wonderful quality meal that Brookline Food Services provided. So that is our goal, but it's also gave us an opportunity to connect and build relationship with the community. And that is something that started on day one. We're very grateful in the food service department to have so much support from the community. And I will say that this year was no different. I think this was our most successful partnership year that we've had. Not because the other years we didn't try. I feel like the more we present this program during the summer, the more partners want to join. I was at a conference Mass Farm to School conference presenting earlier today, and someone said to me, I was telling them how the partnership and the great partnership that we experience in Brookline. And one of my things I will say is there's a partner for that. In Brookline, there's a partner for everything that I can think of. So I want to thank all our partners, all our sponsors. We got sponsorship and very successful sponsorship from almost all the departments that I can think of and that we reached out to. The Department of Public Works, the Brookline Police Department, the Mothers Out Front, Brookline Fire Department. Every department that you can think of was willing to help. And it didn't matter what we asked for, they were always willing to assist, even if it was to provide us a cooler. So we were so happy. That is the foundation, and that is the reason why we do it when we go out into the community and we're able to have those connections and build that relationship with our community. Was a great experience. We had an opportunity to introduce our new deputy superintendent, Dr. Givens, to the community. I'm sure that was an exciting time for her. We also had an exciting time talking to State Representative Vitola, who at the time was in the process of working to get the universal free meals bill passed in the House. And we're always grateful. We always want to partner with those partners who are championing our cause, because universal free meal for us is one of the greatest things I've seen in food services, school food services, and I've been here. I've been doing this for quite some time. So we want to thank those partners. We want to thank especially the Brookline food service staff. There were days when it was over almost 100 degrees and our staff was still out there working, and they didn't skip a beat. They didn't complain. They were as bubbly and as exciting and as motivating us, even when we found out it was going to be a heat wave, we were scrambling for things and they were like, we got this. So it speaks to the testament of the food service team that we have in Brookline. We also want to say thank you to those community partners or vendors who provided gifts and donations. We want to thank those families who came out. And this year, we didn't just use this event as just a kickoff for the summer celebration. We also used it as an opportunity to get information that would help us throughout this year. This year, we're thinking of adding more diversity and more diverse products, more plant-based products to our menu. And we use this opportunity to test some of those products that we were bringing in. We got great feedback. I think that was a great opportunity for us and for families who attended to be able to test and see what we are about to offer. And they were the ones who also made suggestions as to what they want to see on our menu. Overall, I just want to say, I can't say enough how much I'm thankful for school committee for kicking this off, because I feel like this has now become a staple of the community. And that's why I'm excited that we have 4 more years for now to get it done before we have to figure something out. Thank you, food service team. You're awesome. I can see everyone on. I appreciate you coming on. But thank you, Dr. Guillory, for thinking about our department.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sasha. Before we present the award, are there any questions?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Sasha, thank you so much. Oh, you always knock it out of the park. Whatever you take on, you do so well. I was just wondering, what were the locations, and do you have a sense of how many meals you served, either by day, week, or over the summer?
So unfortunately, we just got a tiny plot of land in Brookline that qualifies, and that's the only place that we can have that event, and it's at the Brookline Avenue Playground. That is where the Lynch, Beebe
Oh, okay.
Lynch is located. The other years when it was funded by someone else, we could have used multiple locations, but we lost that when all the waivers went away. This year, it and it is just a fraction of what we typically do throughout the other summers when we have multiple sites. We did over almost 16,000 meals at that one site, which I think it's such a great accomplishment. It was a very hot summer, a lot of families, and one of the reasons for that has nothing to do with the location, but it had to do with the way in which we were required to serve, or the guidelines in which we were given to serve those meals. We had to provide activities during the entire time that we're serving the meals. So I should mention this before, we got a grant to fund someone, and I think Haley, I wish she got an invitation to be on here because she's a high school student who came in and provided activities for that entire period. She had field activities, soccer. She is an awesome student, and we hope that we can provide this or have her come back next year, find some way to fund that because she provided such great service during the summer.
Thank you so much, Sasha.
Mariah, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you also to you, Sasha, and to the team, Donna, Rebecca, also for being and everyone else who's here. I can't see everyone else, but it's really exciting and such a needed resource. So I'm so glad that you've really just launched and taken it over and made it your own. And I'm so impressed by that. You said 16,000 meals were served?
Almost
hear-
16,000,
Wow.
15,600 and something.
And was that 2 months? How many days was it? Because that sounds like so many meals. I
think it was 31 days. It was in the span of 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So
okay,
I think it was
it's
about
like
30.
500-ish, 500 meals a day-ish. Is that about right?
Approximately, because yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's really great. Thank you so much. That's really wonderful.
Thank you, Maria.
Stephen?
Yet more thanks. This is a great initiative, and I got to see it at the beginning, and I'm really excited to see how far it's come. I just wanted to also just give a big public welcome to Rebecca. For those who haven't met her before, it's really exciting that the sustainability coordinator position is filled. It's great that it's filled by Rebecca, who's already done such great work with Brookline. So I'm excited to see Rebecca at this meeting.
Thank you so much.
Ellen?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you too, Sasha. That amazing work for all of you, your whole team. But I was hoping maybe we could make sure we send a press release to the Brookline News. Good news like this is nice to hear, and it would be great to have them do something. They may be listening to us anyways.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, Donna. I didn't call your name on the initial lineup there. So the Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to the PSB Food Services Department with gratitude for operating Brookline's first ever Summer Eats program and for your continued dedication to ensure that PSB students receive high quality nutritious meals year round. And with that, we say congratulations to you all. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the superintendent's report, and we will now move on to public comment. Although there had been one individual who signed up, that person has since withdrawn, so we do not have any public comment. And that will bring us to presentation and discussion of current issues. And first, we will discuss the K-8 World Language Program Review, overview and discussion. Ms. Fortuna?
So I am very excited to be here presenting our K-8 World Language Review, and we also have some of our K-8 World Language teachers who will be sharing their thoughts and views on the program, which I'm excited to have them here as well. In 1998, I'm going to do a little history, which some of you may know already. In 1998, the Foreign Language Task Force proposed a content-based foreign language in the elementary schools, FLES, model with some structural differences. However, they recognized that adding 80 to 200 minutes of instruction would impact the already tight instructional schedule and recommended lengthening the school day. In 2005, the proposal for world languages recommended implementing the FLES model, though it did not recommend extending the school day. This 2005 proposal was the basis for the town of Brookline's decision to introduce world language courses in elementary grades in 2009 following a successful override. The affirmative override vote allowed for a program coordinator and 8.4 teacher FTEs to teach at the elementary level. The program goals at that time were to reinforce learning of the general curriculum content through studying a world language and to understand and appreciate other cultures based on the recognition that Brookline students will be increasingly required to function in a multicultural global economy. Since then, Massachusetts has adopted the Massachusetts World Language Framework in 2021 and defined criteria for earning the seal of biliteracy on high school diplomas. In 2023, the town of Brookline, through the override process, supported redesigning the World Languages program. In the 2022-2023 school year, the public schools of Brookline commissioned a review of the World Languages program to provide the district with a clear picture of the program K-8, its vision, the languages offered, staffing, the amount of instructional time, the type of instruction taking place, and the expectation for students by the end of 8th grade. The intended goals of this review were to determine whether the program meets expectations laid out in 2005, the alignment to the updated frameworks, and whether Brookline students are on a pathway towards the seal of biliteracy. The district partnered with Professionals in Education Advancing Research and Language Learning, PEARL, from the University of Maryland to complete this review. Tonight, the committee will first hear from 3 of our world language teachers, Ms. Pond, Ms. Cow, and Ms. Weiss, about their perceptions and experiences in the program. They will be followed by Thomas Sauer from the University of Maryland, who will present Pearl's findings from the K-8 review. The committee will then have the opportunity to direct questions at tonight's participants. Given the competing finite resources of time, teachers, and finances, we will be seeking direction for a coalition from the school committee regarding the next iteration of the program. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous world language teachers.
Hi, good evening. I'm Marnie Weiss. I am a French teacher here in Brookline. I've been here for, which I believe is 22 years now, teaching middle school French. I'd like to say that we're very excited about being part of the program review. I think as many people can acknowledge, program review is really a very important part of Brookline's process in continued improvement. And it really plays an integral role in not only helping our departments, various disciplines, and programs include the most up-to-date information and teaching approaches. And it also offers our educators a chance to deepen their relationship with what they're teaching. Our K through 12 language program is very popular throughout the district and the community, particularly our K through 8 program, as our community has voted, as mentioned, in several overrides to support the program. We're super excited to be part of this process. And we're also really happy that you've contracted with Mr. Sauer, whom we really respect. Many of us have had the opportunity at conferences for the Massachusetts Foreign Language Association and the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages to attend presentations by Mr. Sauer. So we're familiar with his work and very excited to have the opportunity to learn more from him, collaborate with him. And we're so happy that we are going to be part of looking at this review. As we have such a passion for our program, and having educators involved in the process, we can offer a perspective that can only be provided by those of us doing the work with our students on the ground. We're also very pleased that Mr. Sauer's report identifies and reinforces many of the concerns that we've been voicing to administrators and the school committee over the course of multiple years, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go along. I will pass on to my colleague.
Hello, I'm Shenandoah Pound. Nice to see you all again. This is actually kind of funny. I'm recovering from a cold, so I apologize if my voice is scratchy, but when Mr. Sauer, I see out there, I was the teacher who was silent and had no voice when he observed me. So here we are, full circle. I promise sometimes I have a normal voice and can speak, so in any case. Since obviously Mr. Sauer has yet to give his presentation tonight, we thought we would talk mostly about some of the things that might be outside the scope of the review. This is not obviously any disrespect to the review itself. He mainly focused on language proficiency, which is definitely important and one of our main goals, but he did not look at every single thing. Even the review mentions that there are some of the guidelines in the Massachusetts World Language Frameworks that were just beyond the scope of the review. So we thought we would just speak to those a little bit. So experienced world language teachers collaborate with classroom teachers to reinforce and extend learning in other content areas, especially in K through 5, which I will speak most to since that is where my experience is. As an elementary Spanish teacher, I have taught third graders to create line graphs, practice making tally charts and bar graphs in lower grades, explored the life cycle and migration of the monarch butterfly, and connected with students in Mexico through participation in the Journey North project, practiced composting alongside the grade 2 rotting log unit in science, taken the lead in teaching the grade 1 social studies unit on Mexico, practiced reading and creating maps to show different kinds of information, and taught first graders to think critically about information through a hands-on exploration of the Mercator projection. As you know, transferring knowledge to new contexts is an excellent way to solidify learning and help students truly master the content, and world language provides this opportunity. This is especially valuable for EL students, or English learners, since world language teachers automatically provide the visual support and modeling needed to make concepts clear. Though it is true that most of these connections are not currently part of our official curriculum, this is a common practice in many schools, especially in cases where a teacher has had the opportunity to build expertise in a certain grade level over many years. Beyond academics, our world language classes focus heavily on building community and on social emotional growth, something I think we can all agree that our students desperately need. We explore the zones of regulation, strategies to work through frustration, and learn about the growth mindset and neuroplasticity. Students build connections within and beyond their school communities, and some even have the chance to connect with students around the globe. One of the benefits of the K-8 model is that it also allows for older students and younger students to collaborate, and many world language teachers have arranged buddy activities to connect different grade levels. Overall, our world language classes bring a lot of joy to our schools. As one kindergarten teacher recently told me, and this is a non-world language teacher, there is so little fun in kindergarten. Spanish is always so fun. If you could come to my kindergarten classes, you would see what she means. Mr. Sauer did. You would see the smiles and laughter, and I think you would all agree that our children, and especially our youngest learners, need to feel joy when they come to school. Elementary world language classes are a special time when students get to learn while also getting to move, sing, dance, play games, and even act a little bit silly sometimes. That joy carries through across the years, and learning a new language, something that often intimidates adults, is for many students a highlight of the day. Since being switched into older grades this year, I'm no longer teaching K1 and 2, nearly every single day, my former students, now in 1st and 2nd grade, come up to me and tell me how much they miss Spanish and miss me. And to quote one, "It's just weird not having Espanol anymore." I think we are doing something very right when a 2nd grader feels like it's weird to only hear one language in school. I think that's amazing. And, you know, we live in a community that speaks so many different languages, and I think our World Language Program is one important way that our schools are embracing and reflecting that diversity. Our K-8 World Language Program plays a tremendous role as well in making our students more culturally competent. The United States Department of Education says that learning another language promotes, this is a quote, understanding of world cultures, increased empathy, enhanced connection to heritage cultures, and promotes global awareness, reduced discrimination, improved self-esteem, and stronger cross-group relationships. I think we can all agree that these are things that we want to see in our schools. Students that learn that speaking another language isn't a difference to hide, but a special skill that deserves to be celebrated. Moreover, world language classes provide an opportunity to directly tackle some of the stereotypes that our students may have already absorbed. And I will share a quick anecdote about that. In my 1st grade Mexico unit, one of the activities we do is I ask the students if they think they could tell the difference between a picture of the United States and a picture taken in Mexico, if they could tell where the picture is from. And they are so confident. Every single year, kids are like, yep, absolutely, this is going to be easy, often citing evidence such as, direct quote, "Everyone in Mexico has big hats and mustaches." You laugh, but that's a direct quote. It stuck with me. Grainy and blurry pictures are almost always assumed to be from Mexico, as are pictures of rural areas. Anything with Spanish writing, bright colors, and anything that looks a little bit run down. They will almost without fail assume that that is Mexico, while the United States is any picture that shows things that look more wealthy, more modern, usually things that are more gray, and of course, English. Spanish class gives them the opportunity to interrupt these stereotypes. Again, these are 6-year-olds. They don't know any better, but helping them to think about that and work it through and think about what it means to live in one country or another and how those connections and underlying similarities are really there regardless of where we are, and how there's diversity in all places of the world and there's no one way to be in any place, is such important work and something that I think isn't necessarily happening outside of that special time where we've carved out time in our school day to have those conversations. My students have learned about the important work of women of color like Dolores Huerta and Wangari Maathai, and explored the life of Afro-Cuban singer Celia Cruz in the historical context of the civil rights movement. These are just a few quick examples of the ways that our world language classes support the equity work that I know our district values. It is true that few of the learning experience I have mentioned appear in official program documents, and Mr. Sauer may not have had the chance to see them all in action. But I believe all of you would agree that they are and should continue to be an important part of a Brookline education. And then briefly regarding what is shown in the review and what you will hear Mr. Sauer present tonight, our team overall was not surprised by the findings. Many of the things Mr. Sauer points out are issues that we have been bringing up for years. Some may sound familiar to some of you, and many others we've brought internally in our buildings or with in our department meetings. We are glad to see that Mr. Sauer validates many of our concerns and happy that our team will once again have release day time to work towards resolving them, something that we've been missing in recent years. And though some of these problems are serious, we're glad to have the attention put on them, it's also important to say that we don't believe they are insurmountable. And for example, there are many instances of teachers working on their own time, unofficially rewriting curriculum, creating activities that challenge our students to better align with our proficiency goals, and addressing whatever issues are within our control. With proper support, these efforts could be expanded to improve the outcomes of the program district-wide. We hope that tonight Mr. Sauer will speak more about the pockets of excellence that he mentioned in his previous presentation, so that all stakeholders can have an idea of the excellent work that is not only possible, but already happening in many schools, often despite challenges. We understand that the nature of a review is to generalize and describe common occurrences, so what many or what most teachers were observed to do. But in a program as small as ours, when so few observations were done and not everyone even was observed, even a small number of outlier teachers could represent a significant percentage of our staff. More importantly, best practices that are already happening can create a roadmap to improve outcomes district-wide. Our team hopes that together we can work to leverage these positive examples to strengthen the entire program. And I will briefly mention that also many of those issues that will be mentioned, we do feel are exacerbated by some of the issues that we have spoken to you about before. And we do feel that stabilizing the team is an important first step in doing this work. We are a very passionate team, some of you may have noticed, and we really do want to dedicate that passion to our craft, and we feel that stability is an important first step in that so that we can then fully engage in our work with Mr. Sauer that we're very excited for this year. And I will return to Marnie briefly.
Hello again. So I'd like to speak a little bit to the process of the review by Mr. Sauer and just a couple of concerns that we have and some of the limitations that may be there. It was very hastily conducted, and we would have loved for Mr. Sauer to and be able to hear and witness more of our lessons. Most observations were 10 to 15-minute snippets of lessons by various teachers in various grades that were observed. And it would be wonderful to have more time to work with Mr. Sauer to see full lessons and also to be able to debrief and to discuss what is happening in the context of those lessons and where they lie within our scope and sequence. We also had some teachers who were observed who were new teachers, or in cases because folks have been shuffled around a lot with their grade levels, there may have been teachers who were also in their first year of teaching a particular grade level. And that's something that we would also love to talk about. And as Shen mentioned, being able to stabilize our teaching staff and keeping folks within the same level would be super helpful. We're looking forward to being able to work with Mr. Sauer to expand upon what we already have and to look at the strengths and the positives of our program, hoping that in his presentation with you, he will share some more of those wonderful things that he was able to witness, in addition to some of the challenges that we're facing. And I'm also hoping that all of you have had a chance to read the full report and not just hear the summary, because I think there will be a lot of anecdotes that would be important to see in the full report. One of the recommendations that's made is looking at the data from the Apple assessment, which is the ACTFL assessment of performance towards proficiency in languages. This is a test that has been created by the American Council for Teaching in Foreign Languages. And it's wonderful to try to have a gauge of where we fall in a certain scope. And within different proficiency levels, where are our students reaching the targets that we set for them from year to year. And I hope that as we move forward and look at the data, that we're going to be very intentional in looking at the fact that while students are taking this test in 8th grade, whether it is for children who have had a 6 through 8 language experience, having changed to a different language in 6th grade, or students who have been in the K through 8 program, but many of our students haven't had those full experiences. Many of our students are pulled out for support to attend Learning Center and addressing needs in their IEPs, and they may only be in class for a fraction of the time. Students are pulled out for addressing areas of concern in perhaps with literacy skills or with math skills. I personally have had students who have been pulled for anywhere from a couple days a week to an entire marking period to half of a year, and then coming back in the following year and trying to pick up the pieces and catch up with their classmates. And I think that that's a really important factor to be looking at when we look at that data, that many of those students may not have had the same opportunities as their peers to reach the level of proficiency that we're looking at as our target. And also we have had years in certain schools where for middle school, rather than students meeting 5 times a week in 7th and 8th grade for various reasons with scheduling, et cetera, some students are only meeting 4 times a week. So that's losing 20% of the instruction during a course of a school year. And also some classes also meet for longer lengths of time than what is the recommended. And then the reality of some classes not also having the full amount of time based on some of the crazy schedule stuff. So when we look at that data, I think being very intentional about, in addition to looking at how many students are reaching those proficiency levels, that we're able to look at on an individual level, how many of those students have been in the program for the duration of the program? What kinds of other experiences and pullouts do we have? And if we're looking at some of that, I think we'll be able to have some more accurate information looking at those outcomes. And then of course there's the glitches of the student who presses the button on their little microphone thing and turns off their microphone for half the test, and we don't find out till we realize that they have nothing scored, or the overwhelming thing of 24 kids in a classroom all trying to listen to the test and then speak gets a little bit overwhelming. So those are just some factors to take into consideration as we look at that data. Like I said, it is wonderful to try to have a context, but also there are different components of this test. And lately our students have been focused on doing a listening and then speaking in relation to what they've heard on a video. And I can say that having done this test in the past, if I were to compare prompts in this interpersonal listening and speaking assessment from, say, 5 years ago, there were very, very open-ended questions that addressed a lot of the topics that novice and early intermediate learners would have. And there were very open-ended questions and very good opportunities, whereas a test like this year asked them maybe, out of, I forget how many questions, but 3 separate questions about pets and 2 or 3 different questions about celebrities, which I think when we look at the scope of what we teach throughout our program, we cover so much more than that. And if the testing prompts vary so much from year to year, I think we'll see differences in the kind of data. Are the prompts in the test something that is more cohesive in general and in alignment with what's typically taught in our curriculum, or if it's honing in on a couple of very specific things. So I found that this year's test was particularly awkward for a lot of the students, in comparison to what we have seen in the past with it. I will also say that with our program for students who decide to change languages after K through 5, when given the opportunity to switch languages, coming in as 6th graders, even if they are new to the language, having taught here prior to the elementary world language program, and after that has been implemented, it's been very, very interesting to see the kind of skills that the students bring in, even changing into a new language, that they have. It's not a strange concept to come in and have a teacher who's speaking primarily in the language that they're learning. They're used to that. That seems like a natural thing for them. They have language learner skills that they have picked up as they come in from their K through 5 experiences. They also come in with if they're coming from Spanish into French, they also have entirely different kinds of errors that they would make before. But I see them make wonderful, wonderful connections with what they have learned in their elementary programs and the richness that that also brings to them coming in middle school. And also the level of acceptance of different cultures, instead of saying, oh, that's weird or that's stupid, or like, oh, that's interesting. You know, we also talked about this in our class when we talked about in Spanish class about this other culture or this thing that we looked at. So we also know about that. And now they're also bringing in these wonderful connections that they've picked up in elementary, even when they come in and having changed a language. So there's a richness that follows. And I think if we are also looking at a trajectory and trying to work towards the seal of biliteracy, I think more if we're looking at the whole world language program K through 12 and where we can travel through this. So I think even students who are going on a K through 12 path, perhaps with the same language, or those students who have switched over in middle school and then continue on with that language, or even if they pick a new language in high school, I think there's so much value that is added to their elementary and middle school experiences that will help them on this path to biliteracy, bilingualism, and being part of a world community and having appreciation for language and culture and being able to understand and interact and accept and have a curiosity and a passion. And I think that's one of the really, really big benefits of our program. And thank you very much.
Good evening, Superintendent, School Committee, Mr. Sauer, and my fellow World Language Department teachers. For those who don't know me, my name is Xiaoxue, and I teach Chinese at Driscoll. Please allow me to use an analogy to share my thoughts on the World Language Program. Imagine the World Language Program is like a restaurant, a well-known restaurant with delicious food. The restaurant's reputation draws people from near and far to dine there. The chefs take great pride in their cooking, but for years, they have been facing a series of issues. The work schedule is overloaded. Most chefs have to cover 4 or 5, sometimes 6 shifts in a day. They have to prepare a variety of meals to meet the needs of different diners. Because of the long kitchen hours, most chefs cannot attend the common planning time meetings. As a result, chefs are excluded and not always current on information regarding the customers, and they can't prepare targeted meals for them. Chefs don't always have designated workspaces. They have to share the workspace and carry the cooking utensils and cooking materials wherever they go. To make things even more complicated, experienced chefs are reassigned to prepare different cuisines almost every single year. A pastry chef might be asked to start making sushi, or a single chef has to manage 2 cooking stations at the same time. With the ever-changing cooking assignments, chefs have a very limited time window to collaborate, to revise the existing recipes, and to explore new ones. When they receive the new roles at the beginning of the year, chefs have to learn the new skills and the content quickly, and they are not given the opportunity and the consistencies to follow up, to develop and refine the skills, because next year they will be assigned to a new role. Chefs noticed the issues and shared the concerns with the restaurant management, but the problems persist. Not surprisingly, customers started complaining about the food and gave some negative reviews. Some chefs get tired and leave, taking their expertise and their well-tested recipes elsewhere. Some chefs remain and keep advocating, hoping someday the management team will hear them and address the problems. Sure enough, Mr. Sauer came to review the restaurant and shared his findings, which resonated with all the chefs. Thank you, Mr. Sauer. There is a famous Chinese saying, 巧妇难为无米之炊, means even the most capable housewife cannot cook a meal if she's not provided with rice. We world language teachers are capable. Just give us the rice and see what wonderful meals we can produce. Thank you.
Thank you, world language teachers. And now I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Thomas Sauer from the University of Maryland, who conducted our K-8 review and will also be conducting our 9 to 12 review this year.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to present these findings of the program review of the Brookline K-8 World Language Program. As mentioned in the introduction, I work at the University of Maryland for a center called Professional Education, Advancing Research in Language Learning, and we were excited to be able to conduct this program review. In a previous life, I worked in school districts. I've been to the board meetings. I was a language teacher. I was a school administrator. I worked as principal. So I have worn a lot of those hats and had a lot of those same emotions and reactions to when people wanted to come and review our district, our program, our school, whatever it was. So I know how much anxiety goes into those things. But now being on the other side, it's also important to remember this is a program review, right? This was not a review of individual people. This was a review of the entire program. And with that come all the different elements of a program: students, teachers, parents, administrators, because they all play a role, but they often don't really, talk to each other, and they often don't have the same experiences. So for us, it was just an opportunity to find out where your program is in March, April of this past year. I can't speak to much before, can't speak to anything happened since then, but we wanted to provide you literally with a snapshot, with kind of like holding a giant mirror to your program. See, this is what we see. This is what we heard. This is what people have shared about this program. We used a couple of documents to guide the entire review process. First, of course, the World Languages Curriculum Framework from Massachusetts, the Principles Effective World Language Program from an organization called the National Association of District Supervisors of Foreign Languages, and then a third framework that we own at the University of Maryland. It's called the Teacher Effectiveness for Language Learning Framework. It's a national framework that kind of outlines what effective teachers do. So yeah, so this is a program review. We looked at everything we could possibly find in a very, very short time period. Did classroom observations, the way the schedule worked out with spring break and everything. There were a few days that were really available on the calendar. So we ended up coming on a day that you had some kind of state testing. So we didn't get to see every class, but we saw 21 classrooms, interviewed principals, district staff, reviewed the teachers' schedules, any kind of curriculum that was made available to us, lesson plans, student work. We talked to, of course, the world language teachers. We also surveyed the parents of over 1,000 students. We surveyed the regular K-5 classroom teachers, And we even talked to the high school world language teachers as well, since they're the recipient of the students that come from this program. And then we also used the middle school program review that you already had, because world languages showed up in that review as well. So that really helped us even where to look and where to perhaps find some of the issues that were mentioned in there, and maybe find some new information or additional answers. Then we guided the entire report around 4 questions that I will kind of walk you through this evening. The first one is all about district leadership, school leadership, what kind of policy, what kind of resources, what is in place for the program to be successful. Second question deals with what's the curriculum like, and is really aligned to the national and state standards. Then we're going to look at student growth and really try to find that answer about, are our students ready to earn the seal of biliteracy, and what kind of evidence do we have of their growth in languages? And then finally, what does the instruction look like in the classroom, and is that aligned again to state and national standards? And is it instruction that will actually help the students meet the ambitious goals that the program has? So let's just dig right in and to that first question. So here's that first question. How does the district and school leadership establish, monitor implementation of policies, provide adequate resources, and facilitate space and instructional time to support a highly effective world language instruction for all students? So I forgot who said, but somebody said, I hope you all read the report. I would like to echo that, because I can only show you the highlights. In this, there's a lot more in that report that I can't share today. And in the report, you'll also see it's not me saying those things. It's not the University of Maryland saying those things, but in many cases, we just summarized what your stakeholders told us. We summarized what the teachers told us. We summarized what the parents told us. And you'll see a lot of those things, what they said, either in the surveys or in an interview in the focus group in the report. Our first finding for this question is that the World Language Program has a stated vision that enjoys the support of the school community. Didn't run into anybody really that doesn't like the idea of world languages. And I think that's true for a lot of places. Lots of people like the idea of world languages. And so, yeah, the teachers like it, the regular teachers like it, the parents like it. Brookline clearly wants to have a world language program, which is not true in all communities, by the way. But in those communities where they have it, yes. The purpose of the program as part of the larger curriculum is clear to most, but not all stakeholders. So there's some questions in some stakeholders about how does this connect to everything else that we're doing? We heard that a lot of, like, we're doing a lot in Brookline, and how does this particular piece fit into it? There were lots of references to very full plates and large pies and icing and toppings, and which role does the world language program play? So based on those 2 findings, and of course, our recommendation is that you all need to figure this out. Really, what is the role of the language program, not as a single program, because it's not a boutique program. It shouldn't be just a boutique program, but one of the teachers mentioned all the connections that she's making in her particular classroom. So how does that fit into, for the entire program? How does that fit into the larger K-8 program? So if you want this to be a signature program, then we got to figure out, how does that fit into the overall vision for teaching and learning? How are we sharing the messages? How are we communicating those things to all the stakeholders? The second finding is a big kudos to the school committee and the district overall. The program provides staff that allows for long sequences of articulated language courses, even when scheduled time or school space are limited. You guys have a pretty big program. You've invested resources to provide the staffing. That's to be commended. That's a hard battle to fight in other districts. And because of that, students now have the opportunity to really gain high levels of proficiency in one language for 13 years, or gain proficiency in 2 languages over 13 years. I mean, if you go to any world language conference or a conference, people, this is the vision, having these long sequence. This is what people want. And you have some of the pieces already in place. But you also know, just because we have teachers, how we're using them, it's a challenge. And so, yeah, there are some issues with instructional time and how it's allocated from grade level to grade level. And you heard already earlier, Jody talking about it, and it has changed. And you can see in the report even how it has changed again. And my understanding is it has changed again even for this school year. So that would be obviously an area of concern. And then we heard this already, of course, from the teacher as well, that the language teachers don't always have a dedicated classroom space, or sometimes the regular classroom teacher doesn't even leave. So that causes sometimes even some confusion for the students when it comes to classroom management issues. Also, it's confusing for the teachers as well, and who's really in control of a particular classroom. So our recommendation here is really to purely look at those scheduling practices to make sure that the teachers have what they need, meaning limit as much as possible the number of grade levels the teacher is assigned during a given academic year. So they have less to prepare, less changes from year to year. Yeah, so looking at teachers, how can you simplify teacher schedules so that they're not running away from you? Finding number 3 is that the program does not provide equitable access to world language learning experiences for all students. So we have this fantastic vision, we have invested funds into having the program, but not everybody has the same access to that program. So we noticed on the schedules and also in interviews that students with IEPs or other special needs are frequently pulled out of language classes to receive support services. And what we've noticed, it has become, not in all schools, but in some schools, almost a habit of that world language class is the default pull-out classroom. And we know that in many cases that sometimes, that's the one class that a kid actually looks forward to coming to school. And so if they get pulled out of the one thing that they're really excited about, probably does impact the rest of their academic experience. There's no real systematic approach to providing differentiated language learning experiences for heritage language learners. There are obviously heritage language learners in your classes, but teachers are really left on their own to figure out how to make that work. Some parents took some major issue with that. So our recommendation here really is to develop systems that provide language learning experiences that meet the needs of students with heritage and native speaker capabilities, and any other identified students. So figuring out, just making that process for pullout more transparent, because in many cases, the parents didn't even know that perhaps their student was being pulled out during the language class. So just, there shouldn't be a surprise. And then also figure out what are the most obvious curricular extensions and resources teachers need to address the needs of those heritage language learners. And then finding 4 in this first question, which is all about big picture and structures, is that some of the program structures impede communication among stakeholders. And then when you're, it's like everything else. When you don't have good communication, then you can't really help somebody else, right? So we've got some communication issues happening there. First one is that world language teachers are often excluded from grade level communication. So they have these students and they don't really know enough about them and what else is happening in their daily school life. World language teachers aren't even notified sometimes when their students are pulled out. They don't even know this has happened sometimes, which was surprising to hear. And they don't know when they're coming back. So again, that's an issue. And then we haven't really shared expectations for K-5 classroom teachers. Like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to stay? Am I supposed to participate? Am I supposed to help with classroom management? The classroom teachers weren't really sure, what is my role in this? How can I support world language instruction? I like it. I think it's important for my students, but I don't really know how to do that. So that's another communication issue, obviously. And while the district has shared performance targets for each grade level, and they're posted on the district website, the parents don't really know or don't really have any other information about the learning outcomes about the program. It's somewhat limited. Again, it varies from school to school, it varies from teacher to teacher, but most parents weren't exactly sure about what their kids are supposed to be able to do, which can backfire on you, because if they don't know, they'll make some assumptions, and your parents have made some assumptions, and they have set some expectations that may or may not be realistic or unrealistic. It's a communication issue, and that's fixable, right? There's processes we can, but I even put an example in the report of what one district has done. Yeah, so it's, again, we just got to be really strategic about that communication, so that the folks know what's happening in all those things. All right, so that was the first question. That is all about big picture, structure, support. Second question we looked at is the curriculum. And how does the curriculum align to the national standards for language learning or for learning languages, and to the Massachusetts curriculum framework for world languages? So we looked at all the curriculum documents, and they exist a lot, and they're in lots of various formats. And some of the content is actually really good, and some of it needs some work. It's not consistently aligned with national state standards. So the curriculum does identify what students will know and be able to by the end of each grade level. Kudos. The elementary school Spanish curriculum appears to be more of a series of topics repeated across grade levels. And again, the document said that, as well as some of our interviews revealed that as well. But of course, it didn't sound like what was just shared by one of your teachers. So yeah, there might be some teachers might be doing this, but as far as the program overall, we're not seeing that yet. The middle school Spanish curriculum is not really aligned to the performance targets of the program. We do have one, but you have to remember that your middle school Spanish kids have been in the program ideally already 4 or 5 years, even if we know that's not true for all kids. But certainly that should be the target, and that's currently not the case. And then the last one is that the curriculum does not consistently identify how students will demonstrate what they can do with what they know through formative and summative assessment. And we'll come back to that assessment question a little bit later on. So we have some pieces in place, but it definitely needs some work to be added on. And one of the really strengths of the curriculum was that it does identify a variety of instructional strategies and resources. So if a teacher does want to get access to almost ready-made lesson, in some cases, those actually exist, and the program does provide for that. So our recommendation here is to really develop a complete K-8 world language curriculum around a series of backward design thematic units that identify performance objectives, performance assessment, tasks, and anchor lessons. So we do recommend kind of a complete overhaul of the curriculum, not because it's bad what you have, but it's really hard to fix. It's clear that your curriculum has been developed over many, many years. And again, having been in those shoes, I know what happens. We put this Band-Aid on, and we put this Band-Aid on, and then we put this Band-Aid on. And then when somebody from the outside like me looks at it, I only see a bunch of Band-Aids, and I can't really see purpose and structure and everything else anymore. And if I were a new teacher, that would be hard for me to do then as well. So sometimes it might be easier just to start fresh. And so, yeah, redesign seems like a good idea, even when it comes to curriculum. The third guiding question is all about student growth. So, okay, so got the program in place, curriculum, we're going to work on that. But how do we actually document student growth? What are we actually getting a bang for a buck, I guess, as they say, right? Are we getting everything for what we invested in? Are students meeting our targets? So we found is that currently the program has not developed the balanced assessment approach that offers multiple formative, summative assessment opportunities and benchmark assessments. But it's not all bad. There are some good places in that finding. Because you do have a process established that connects external benchmark data. You have heard about the Apple test that's been given in the past, but it's currently only limited to listening and speaking. And of course, that's only 2 parts of anybody's language skills. And we have other things that we should be assessing as well. We don't currently monitor or document student language performance by developing formative and summative performance assessments across the 3 modes of communication. That was a curricular issue that I referenced earlier. Doesn't mean assessment isn't happening. It's just there's no formal process and we don't really monitor, we don't document. It's mostly left up to the teacher. And when we're looking at some of the student work that the teachers submitted, you can see how it varies widely. Some of them are, this is exactly what we want, and some of them are like, that is probably not, probably a non-example. So our recommendation here is to expand the collection of summative internal and external assessment data in order to document student growth in language learning. So you want to make sure you include reading, make sure we include writing in that process. You know, right now we're just doing it in 8th grade, which it's probably too late. If we're actually using in a balanced assessment approach, we would be using the data all along the way to make sure if we have to make changes that we would know. So you don't need to wait for a program review to come in and say, oh, well, you have all these holes in these grades. So there ought to be assessments that maybe are given at key transition points like grade 2, grade 5, and grade 8. They don't have to be external, but there ought to be some kind of common end of unit or end of course assessment that we can see and monitor, are the kids actually progressing the way they are? And of course, going back to finding 1, then we can communicate these things to other stakeholders like parents, administrators. The program does document and report student growth based on performance in world language class and external assessment, and I couldn't be more excited about that. In fact, I'm giving a presentation at our national convention about this very issue, because so many teachers don't do that, and you guys have really worked really hard on figuring this out. First of all, okay, we have some external assessment data. It may not be enough, but we are analyzing it. And so that's great. We don't do anything with the analysis, so kind of we're not changing the program because of it. All right. But then the highlight, I think, for me is to find out and to really learn how careful and intentional the program was about using standards-based grading practices to provide feedback on student proficiency. Standards-based grading is the best thing, no matter what, when it comes to learning languages. Like, it's a skill. It's a, grades just don't make it. It doesn't make, you can't say you're a B+ in French. That doesn't mean anything. So standards-based grading is phenomenal. And your district has done a really nice job in working and rolling it out. And yeah, so definitely a highlight for me to see that. Recommendation here would be, again, to expand the external assessment opportunities in order to monitor and also make adjustment to the programs. And so we talked about this already, key transition points, those kind of things. And then kind of the most important one that we were asked really by district staff was like, okay, so how close are we to this seal of biliteracy that everybody seems to be talking about? Almost all states now have a process for awarding the seal of biliteracy. It's a super fun time in the summer when all the districts across the country are sharing via social media how many students have earned the seal of biliteracy in their districts, and the elaborate ceremonies they put out there to really honor their kids' language learning. And obviously it's not just for world language, but also for English language learners as well. But right now, you are one of the few districts in Massachusetts that doesn't have a process in place to award that seal. It's really very much the minority. So I hope as you're looking at the redesign and you're looking at rewriting curriculum and looking at schedules, the goal should still be, I hope, to award the Seal of Literacy to the students of Brookline, because they certainly they deserve that opportunity as well. And then the last question is the one about the instruction. So this is about what's actually happening in the classrooms. And I think whenever I do a workshop with just working with teachers, I say that all the time. And that is, I firmly believe that no teacher gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes to school and says, today I'm going to do a bad job, right? I do firmly believe that all teachers do the best every single day. It's incredible what teachers are capable of doing. And we have certainly all learned that through the pandemic years. So with that being said, I saw in my mind the best your teachers are capable of doing. And the beautiful thing of a program review is that you can see certain trends fairly quickly. And again, we're trying to find out where's the program, not where individual teachers. Would I love to observe every single teacher for multiple class periods and sit down with them and give them feedback? Yeah, that would be amazing. But that would be a lot of time and very, very expensive. And you have district staff who's capable of doing that already. So that being said, here are a couple of findings in the instruction areas. We did see teachers using some very core instructional strategies that are definitely effective in facilitating language learning. We saw the target language frequently used as the language instruction to provide comprehensible in many classrooms. To translate this is, your teachers are actually speaking the language that they're teaching. I know that seems kind of like a duh, Thomas, why do you have to highlight this? Because this is a big issue in districts and in schools all across the country. There's teachers who generally don't even believe that you can do this. Your teachers believe it, walk the walk, they're actually doing it. With the exception of very few classrooms, they're speaking the language. Authentic materials support language learning experiences in almost all classrooms. They may not like the way they were used, but they were there and they're using them. And so they're making real life connections for the students. So they're not just using random things to teach, Sesame Street Spanish, but they're actually using real things and making these connections to different cultures, to different languages. We saw some incredible middle school teachers facilitating communicative tasks for students in order to connect students' interests as well as current and prior experiences. Your middle school teachers really, there were some classes where I did not want to leave. The schedule kind of dictated that we had to leave, but I genuinely got so involved in the class that, it's always good when I can learn something too, that I didn't want to leave. And that's usually a good sign, because if I'm engaged, that means the students are definitely engaged as well. And they were engaged because the teachers were tapping into the students' interests, which was incredible to see. And then I'm not telling you anything new here, but your teachers, they're passionate bunch of people. They're ambassadors for the language and culture they teach, and they're definitely sharing that passion with the students. And you saw that even in the interactions that I saw with students had with teachers in the hallway. Even the students that weren't even seeing in that moment, that they're passionate about it, and that it's kind of contagious almost, and the kids absolutely love when their language teacher comes in, and that's always great to see. Our recommendation here is to use that framework that I referenced earlier, the Teacher Effectiveness for Language Learning Framework, to prioritize some highly relevant teaching practice that can be implemented by all world language teachers, meaning, so how can we take those pockets of excellence and how can we make that the norm for every teacher? Unfortunate reality is most teachers haven't seen another teacher teach. So you might think if you're doing great things in your classroom, everybody else is doing great things too. Or if you're doing something in your classroom that's not so great, you might not even know it's not so great because you've never seen another great teacher. So using that framework will really help us have some conversation to bring some common expectations to instructional practices across all classrooms. And then finding 10 was that teachers' practices are often reflective of some limiting beliefs in students' abilities to learn languages. So what do we mean by that? Is that it's not that the teachers, again, they all come in wanting to do a good job, but the schedule and the limitations of the schedule, at least how it was in the spring, has created this culture where teachers are almost reluctant to establish high expectations for their students. And that we saw that in what they were doing, the activities they were doing. We saw that in the lesson plans. We saw that in the student work. We saw that in what parents reported their students were doing in their class. Students' experiences in grades K-5 are frequently very teacher-centered and limiting, student-to-student action happen very rarely. It's usually a teacher talks, a student talks, a teacher talks, a student talks. This isn't even a world language problem. This is an overall education problem. But in a world language classroom, that could be a critical issue. And then learning experience for students in K-5 are also often limited to the word level production. And that's another issue because it doesn't align with your expectations of your program. So our recommendation here would be to provide your teachers with professional learning that allows them to develop a deep understanding of the proficiency guidelines so that they can make better informed instructional decisions that will help them get their kids to meet the expectations of the program. And it's like, oh, well, we've done this training once. It's one of those trainings you have to do over and over and over and over again. It's probably the most complicated thing. Very, very few teacher training programs even discuss this as part of their preparation. So the majority of teachers probably didn't get this until they became a language teacher. But it's the most foundational thing, and it impacts every single decision that they make as a teacher after that. And then finding 11 is that kind of summary of where we started in the beginning, is that the effectiveness of a teacher is directly impacted by limitations of the curriculum, by scheduling choices, by the grade level coordination, and also by district expectations. So what do we mean by that? Oh, yeah. So this kind of like everything I mentioned before, that's right, kind of does impact what they can do. So it's kind of like, well, if your schedule is really busy, I guess it's that Chinese, the analogy that was made with the restaurant, right? It becomes really hard to cook quality food. And so our recommendation here would be to develop additional embedded professional learning opportunities, and also, very surprisingly, come up with some kind of expectation for lesson planning. I was surprised to see that there isn't an expectation, that it varies widely from school to school and from teacher to teacher what the expectation is for lesson planning. Big fan of lesson planning. I know the real world is different, but I also know that every workshop that I give, that I plan with the lesson, is a better workshop than the one that I just kind of figure out on the fly. So that kind of is, those are the findings and recommendations of our report. Again, my plea to please read. And we designed the report even the way that highlighted some of the quotes. So if you don't want to read every single word, go for the big yellow quotes and read those, because those are quotes from your parents, from your teachers, who support our findings and our recommendations.
So that concludes both presentations for this evening. We'd like to hear any questions from the school committee.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. So a question I have, allocation of time came up as a challenge, and I was curious by a remark you made, sorry, I'm not recalling your name, when you were talking about your first grade unit on Mexico and how that's a social studies unit. So do you sometimes offer instruction in Spanish during minutes that would be allocated for social studies? How does that work? If you are, how pervasive is that?
In my situation with that unit, that was developed over because until this year, I had 10 years teaching first grade Spanish. So I was with the same teachers. They saw me coming in. It was a unit that they had from the social studies department and sort of were saying like, hey, we're going to do Mexico. Maybe we can collaborate. And we looked at what their expectations were. So I do that exclusively in my Spanish time. And then they mainly supplement the unit, they told me, with read alouds during the read aloud time, but it sort of frees up some time in their day that maybe would be social studies minutes because we're kind of doubling up in and doing social studies learning, but also doing it in Spanish. So that is all happening within the 60 minutes per week for Spanish, with them, again, supplementing some on their own with read alouds and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
And can I just comment on that too? Because that's what we want to do, right? It's not just that they're teaching social studies. It's, for me, this is what we're talking about. Figure out what is the role of world languages. And in this case, it allows you to extend the learning across content areas, right? We tell teachers to differentiate, and then we don't give them much training. This is the ultimate way of differentiation, because if a student didn't get the content in one content area, they might get it in the Spanish class, right? So they have another opportunity to interact with the exact same content that they had with their regular classroom teacher, but now they're doing it in another language. And for some kids, that's just all they need. It might be a different teacher, a different approach, a different way of getting to what's being already taught. So it's a beautiful way of differentiating for your students. It's a beautiful way of extending the curriculum into other content area and really make those connections. Yeah, I mean, there was Mexico. Why wouldn't you teach it in Spanish?
Right.
Natalia?
I just want to follow up on that. Is there an opportunity for sort of, you're teaching the colors in Spanish, for the art teacher to reinforce that, or the math teacher to reinforce the numbers? Like, is there a mutuality? Like, because otherwise it feels like there's just more content for you to teach rather than the reverse.
I would say, similar to sort of what some of the things that Mr. Sauer was saying, a lot of it falls to the teachers. So yes, that opportunity exists because you can do any content area in the other language, and you could do any language, you can use that to supplement that content area. So it really is very dependent on the relationships, I think. So again, I do have a fair amount of that happening in my building because I've been there for 10 years and I have established relationships with those teachers and teams. And I hear 2 minutes of their teaching as I'm coming in, and they overhear what I'm doing. So it's easy to make those connections, but obviously it's much more difficult if you're bumped to a new school or a new grade level and kind of just trying to figure out the basics. It's a lot harder to sit back and say, like, gee, how could I maybe loop in a project with the music teacher, which, I do connect with the music teacher, but that's very dependent on, I'm sadly kind of a unique case that I was in the same role for so many years.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, if you don't mind. I wonder if you could explain, Mr. Sauer, a little bit about the seal of biliteracy. Is that after graduation of high school? Is that when students would be awarded that? And is that based on an assessment or a test? Or could you just tell me a little bit about it, since we don't seem to offer it? So I'm curious.
It's the district policy. So every state has their own guidelines. And it varies from state to state, but there's often a minimum level of language proficiency that students have to reach. I have not come across any state that says it has to be at a certain time. So in some states, kids can actually get it before they graduate from high school, but often it's done in conjunction with their high school because their English proficiency is often documented through performance on whatever the state test happens to be. So this way, say if you are a native speaker of a language that's not taught in your district, right? Some, maybe Romanian. And so they'll take a proficiency test in Romanian to document that they are proficient in Romanian at those levels. And then their successful completion of their English state test is the documentation of their English proficiency. And that's how they would get the seal. Now, for students who obviously learn a second language, it happens whenever the kids reach, and often that is high school. And then they take
an assessment for that? Is that what, there's a test that they take for that? Okay.
Yeah, but again, that depends. There's not every state says there's not one test. Every state says here all the different tests you can take. varies from state to state. Then this, if a district comes up with their own policy based on the state guidelines. In some states, you can take an AP exam, and that's your validation of your test. So it's already, it's something that they're already doing. Or in your case, you guys are already giving the Apple exam. That is in most states as one of the exams that is recommended for the seal by literacy.
And did you want to follow up on that, Helen? Because I had a different
Yeah.
question. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so did you look at how many kids take the AP exams in world language, in the different languages?
No, because we only did K8
haven't
as
done
part
that
of this
yet.
review. So we'll do it when we do K12. Yeah,
Okay.
very curious to
Because
see also the
is it
outcomes.
just another test, or is it something that really means something by literacy? The AP test, you get credit in college, or you can
Correct.
place out of classes. But
Correct.
by literacy, what does it do for you?
Again, I think
I
it
mean,
started
doing
off.
the process, not being biliterate, that I
Yeah.
agree with, but.
Well, I think it means that the school district recognizes the fact that they are biliterate. That's already an accomplishment because that's not happening. I don't know how many languages are spoken in your district, but in my home district, it's something like 87 languages.
I think we have about the same.
And so those students just kind of, they disappear. That nobody is even aware that they speak those languages often. If they get out of EL services, they don't. So we want to actually honor the students' home language if they're at that level, because it should be honored. And if they're learning a second language, we should honor the fact that they've gotten to such high level. In most states, I can tell, in order to get the seal, you have to be, I don't know if Massachusetts, I should have looked it up, but in most states, it's an immediate high, which is, you have to be at a level, proficiency level of an immediate high, which happens to be what most Spanish teachers are. So you almost have to be as good as your teacher in order to get that seal. So it's a pretty big recognition. And we're starting to see some colleges giving college credit, but our post-secondary friends, they're just, if our education system was developed in the 19th century, their education system was developed in the 18th century, so they're a little farther behind than we are. So.
Thank you.
Mariah?
Thank you. I have two questions. Sorry, I just knocked my camera over. One question I have, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it in the longer report too, was about the connection between world language instruction and immersion opportunities and English language learner instruction as well. And we had talked about this last year in the ELL program report as well, and the opportunities for immersion programs. And I was just wondering if there was any comment from either you, Jody, or you, Dr. Sauer, or anyone on what the recommendations might be or possible future directions might be regarding immersion. And while that's percolating, I'm just going to add my second question is basically now what? Like what happens after this?
So I can try to take a stab at both of those for you, Mariah. After this, our hope is to create a task force to look at the reviews and to redesign our program so that it's more effective for our students and our teachers. As you've heard, many of the challenges are a result of the structural problems that the program has had. And we've been through many iterations, and I don't think we've addressed the core structural problems of the program. Immersion is a different type of program, and it's something that we can certainly explore as an opportunity for the district. That an immersion program often brings another host of challenges as well as opportunities for students. So we haven't talked about that. It was beyond the scope of the report, but that's certainly something that we can consider.
Can I respond to that quickly, David?
Go ahead.
Okay, just that I'm not an expert whatsoever. I'm like a negative expert in immersion and world language instruction. With that said, it seems like an amazing opportunity to explore and see what works. And in fact, what Shenandoah has described in a lot of ways, and thinking about the current intersection of, for example, the social studies unit and language. I mean, this is things that are happening in bite-sized nibbles in our school. And so how do we really make this a comprehensive program and maybe do something? I mean, obviously immersion, I know in the past it's been discussed, but it was something that we were talking about not doing because not every school would be the same. And I think that that's, in my opinion, that's a misguided way to think about it. I think that we need to think about providing opportunities where students can thrive in their own way wherever they are. So I personally am very interested in exploring the immersion model, and I hope that the task force will consider this as they think about the reimagining of world language and how we can have different kinds of programs to meet students' individual needs. Especially, and I just want to add one more thing on the discussion around IEPs as well, and how and other students with identified needs are getting pulled out of language time. And so how do we change the model so that students are having opportunities to participate in a broader spectrum of their day? Thank you.
Dovetailing off of Mariah's question around immersion, if one of the goals of the World Language Program is ultimately to achieve biliteracy, is 60 minutes really sufficient to do that? Which is not to say get rid of it, but to say, is there a way to explore offering more minutes through some of this cross interdisciplinary teaching? Or I'm just wondering how we could increase it so that students are optimized for actually learning the language so that they could have some degree of fluency in it. And obviously that's a challenge in terms of allotment of minutes and in terms of overall structure. But that would be something that I think would be worth exploring.
And David, to that point, there are systems, districts that are doing this very well and successfully. So I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel when we take a look at it, but I think we could explore districts where they are doing this successfully and really kind of learn from them and take some notes and see whether it makes sense to bring some of that here or not. But it's out there and they're being successful. So,
Stephen?
Thanks, David. So thanks, Thomas, for that summary of your report, which I just want to reiterate, I thought was really excellent in its readability and its clarity and its recommendations. And thanks to the world language teachers for their succinct presentation about some of the issues they've faced over the past few years that have led to the point that we're at. Mariah took the 2 points that I wanted to raise, so I just want to ask slight complementary questions to both. First, I have a question about recommendation number 3, about equity. I just have a question about whether you spoke with principals as well and other administrators at the school about this issue, whether they were aware of this issue, whether that's actually sort of become part of planning at schools, that world languages is considered a class that is available for pullouts, whether that's part of the world language, how we treat world languages. Has that just seeped into what we're doing with world languages at a deeper level? That's my first question.
Yeah, it did come in principals interviews, not with all of them, but several of them did mention it. I not wanting to I would have to pull up my notes again, but I think there was a sense of like we had our hands tied because there was a lot of blame on the district. They want us to do all these things, and so
right.
What else? What else can I possibly do?
So it's almost like another casualty of the scheduling issues in the district is that world languages has been pushed into this position where it's this like escape valve for scheduling issues.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that means it's not a world language problem.
Right. But it's become a world language. It's become an equity in world languages problem.
You know what I mean? They're not the
right, exactly. But the root problem is not world language. Correct. Right. Okay. So the bigger question I have also is you describe a district in Brookline that has an unusual number of assets in that it does a lot of things that you say a lot of districts are trying to get to. It has the political will, it has a lot of pedagogical strengths, it has a lot of good practices. Is this like other districts? And the reason I'm asking this is, of the 11 recommendations you have, is there a priority of these recommendations? Do you think we proceed with goal settings and then move on to curriculum? Do we start by tinkering? Like, how do you see us moving forward? I know that Dr. Fortuna has talked about, just mentioned a committee to take a look at this to determine a way forward, but can you give us a hint? Is there another district that can provide us with a blueprint for how to move forward with this set of recommendations, or are we a weird district?
It's, and I think I shared that with the teachers when I gave them a preview of the findings. This is so hard because there is not a blueprint. It's one of the hardest things that districts are dealing with when they're doing world language programs. And that's why they come and they go, which is not a good thing, right?
No.
But you've made such large investments, it'd be crazy to let it go, I think. And because it is, we may not like the structure, but it is part of the structure. So I think there's ways to fix it. So I would start with the higher level items, which is the goals. What's the purpose of the program, and how does that connect? And then maybe look at some of the other initiatives, programs that you have, and how can we, make better connections to them. And then curriculum would obviously be the next. And I think everything else will fall in line with that. But no, unfortunately, there aren't. There really aren't. And the research is super limited too. There's hardly any research on elementary programs, because they're very boutique.
Sorry, even that was really interesting to me. I wasn't aware that districts tend to yo-yo with their political will around their around their world language programs.
Because it's often the first thing to cut, right? If you have a budget cut, or if you have some new initiative from the state or some other, it's usually because that's the problem. And I think part of it is related to not Brookline per se. I don't have any evidence of it, but it's a conversation I have around the country all the time. Everybody likes the idea of world languages, but everybody thinks it's hard, and most of us had a terrible experience. And so it's really hard to become a champion of it. The teachers are, but for outsiders, for non-teachers to become champions of it, it's very, very difficult, right? Music is different. Like, most of us like music, same thing, but most of us maybe had some experiences, the positive experiences with music. And so it's much harder to find champions for the programs. But you have champions for the programs for sure in your district. Beyond teachers, but it's harder.
Thank you.
Ellen?
So I'd like to follow up on what you were saying, because I think you're absolutely right that unfortunately Americans don't value a second language for the most part. If you look across the United States, it's just not something that's valued. And when you don't value it, then you don't do it, or you don't like it, or it's okay not to like it. And that's a real problem, I think, in our global society. I mean, I was fortunate in my 7th grade class, and it was late, but I had been exposed to second languages from birth. We had an excellent Spanish program, and I was able to speak Spanish, go to Spain, and be able to converse after 3 years. And that's important. I think it's critical. Even if you can't do it well, young kids are free, feel like it's fun for them, as you said. I see it with my 3-year-old grandson, who wants to know how you say this in Spanish and how you say that in Spanish. And that's the kind of joy you have to capture early, so they see it as a positive. And I think we can improve this program. I'm very confident the task force will work on it, and that's great, and it's important. And maybe the biliteracy stuff is something to look at when you go to the high school and figure out why, because our teachers know about it. I don't know why, the curriculum coordinator never went for it, or why we haven't done it. There must be a reason, I assume. So thank you for your report. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll help us along the way here.
Be glad to.
And also, if there are districts that are doing it well, it would be, K through 8, that would be really important to know, even private schools that do it well. I think
Yeah.
that, and maybe part of it is, what do they do in other countries? That it
I mean,
works.
I'm not saying I'm not saying immersion one way or the other, but I can tell you that our national organization, they give an annual award every year for the so quote unquote best elementary school program. They have a dedicated award for elementary school programs. And if you look at the recipients over the last 20 years, I think it's well over half, and even more high percentage in the last 10 years that are immersion programs, which I think is interesting as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
That the recipients have been mostly immersion programs lately.
Immersion programs, but not.
That's where we're seeing the most innovation when it comes to language learning at the elementary level.
And in Europe, what do they do?
Oh, I think we don't want to go that conversation because it's not equitable at all. It's a beautiful fairy tale that language teachers share, but I'm not sure it's based on reality. Some students have really good experiences. Some have some not so good experiences.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Natalia?
So I have a couple questions and thoughts. The report captures some of the parent frustration that, my child has been doing this for, 8 years and can't say anything. And I think one thing that a teacher was reported and saying is like that parents don't understand what you should be able to know. So the question to you is, what should, and I know we don't have some of the goals, but what should should we be saying that K through 2 is just to be hearing a language, to learn love of language, respect for other cultures? Like, should we be communicating differently as to what we're trying to get out and when your child would have some proficiency? And I bring it up, the analogy is sort of the music instruments, like my daughter has been doing clarinet for 2 years and I'm actually quite impressed that she can play a song now, and I'm like, oh, wow, she can play a song. And I don't know if the minutes of instruction is the same. And I don't know if but her Spanish is actually not very good, but she doesn't practice at home Spanish. She practices the clarinet at home and, for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So I don't know. I feel like, and I kind of want to disagree with you, Helen. I do think Brookline parents do have deep respect. The US as a whole. So I think there's huge, and we heard from so many parents when, by email saying like, this is really important to us. So I think because so many parents value it and because so many parents are bilingual, including myself, I was raised bilingual and I speak some Spanish and French and everything. I feel like we also have expectations, but it might not be, we haven't thought about how we learned those languages, and it was much more immersion, for people like myself who are English language learners. English is everywhere, so you're kind of immersed in it. But I do think that parents are frustrated because they do speak multiple languages, many parents, if we were to question. So how do we communicate? What are we trying to get out of this program? And what should be our goals? Like, is K through 2 just a love for language? Is 3 through 5 being able to have little conversations, and then real learning happens in 6 and above? And then a very separate teacher to the teachers. I was a teacher briefly, and classroom management was my hardest thing. Like, how much did you observe the teachers having to switch into English to manage misbehavior? None? That's great to know.
There was a couple, but they were new teachers. So,
Okay.
But that was not an issue. No, that was not an issue.
Okay, good.
And that speaks to the relationships that teachers clearly have with the students, right? Well, there's two things. We can probably, I would have to ask our research department, but I know that in the surveys, we actually asked that question about languages spoken at home, how many, and all those things. So we could probably even look at that data, the comments from the teachers to see if there's different trends with parents that come from, students who come from bilingual homes versus students who come from monolingual homes, which might be interesting to see. And then as far as what you do have you do have identified, I don't want to say realistic, but you have identified performance targets, outcomes for your classes. We haven't communicated them with parents other than putting a chart on the website, which if I'm not the language teacher, those words don't mean anything to me. And so I think we just need to do a better job of explaining what those words mean. And then we don't actually know yet if we're meeting those targets because we're not assessing until 8th grade. So I think we don't know, right? So yeah, so we gotta make sure that we're actually getting those targets, which means we have to do a better job in assessing. And then we have to do a better job of explaining to our parents to show them what they can do. I'm also convinced the other thing we have got to do is do a better job for the kids to explain them what they can do. Because students don't think they learn anything in any class. Because if you ask them what they learned in math, they also tell you they learned nothing. And if they learned anything in social, they also tell you they learned nothing. That's also not true, right? So how do we communicate about learning a language? And in that case, it's super important because as a parent, I can probably look at a worksheet that comes home from math and I kind of can figure it out. I can even ask a math problem when I see it and I know what my daughter is doing, but I don't know what she's learning in Chinese. So there's ways, and that's why we said we got to have some systems in place that allows us to communicate to parents and to kids actually, what can you do with this language?
Suzanne?
Yeah, so I am struggling a little bit. I think we do recognize the importance of a second language because if your first language is not English. So we put a lot of energy into being English-centric, and if you're not there by birth or, family, we make sure that you get a lot of that and that you're English proficient. But we don't have that commitment to a language other than English. So we are committed to teaching a second language, that's my point, but not necessarily anything other than English. And so, we could maybe learn from some of those lessons how we teach children English as a second language or as not a first language, and bring some of that over to how we teach English speakers another language. It's just a thought. I mean, I'm just kind of grappling with what some of this might mean in terms of offering opportunities for our children to learn something other than English. But we are pretty good at teaching English, and it is immersion. So, there's lots of reasons why that might work, but there may be something we can learn from that as well.
Anyone else?
I just want to clarify, I'm talking about the United States in general. I'm not talking about Brookline. I know Brookline's a different place. It's the reason we have K through 8 world language, because we are different. But anyway, just wanted to make that clear.
Sure, go ahead.
Questions to Jody, is this task force going to have to consider cutting, the proposal that happened, when you reached out and said, we don't have enough teachers, we're going to, go from, it caught us all by surprise. What should we talk about? Are we going to go back to the drawing table that it might not be a K through 8, it might be a 3 through 8 or a very limited, what are the parameters that we have to work with?
I'm actually looking for the school committee to help set those parameters because it's in your purview of what we offer. I'm hearing a lot about immersion programs. Is that going to be a priority? Do we plan for an immersion program to be a very different sort of planning? Do we plan with the current resources that we have? Do we increase the time that our kindergarten students are getting? And what's the cost benefit of doing that? So I think it's all on the table right now. And I will be looking to the committee for some direction on the way, because you represent the larger community. So looking for that direction on the way that we should be going.
Helen?
So the things I heard from the report, and maybe I didn't hear it all correctly.
Wait, sorry, hang on, Helen.
Yes?
Can I just follow up on that last comment? I'm sorry, Helen, do you mind?
No, go ahead.
Thanks. So that's I'm happy to hear that, Dr. Fortuna. I'm not sure, in my time in the school committee, I don't recall a mechanism like that before. I wonder, Dr. Guillory, if you have any advanced ideas for how the school committee could work with the Office of Teaching and Learning for setting the parameters of the future of the world language program. Would that be a docketed part of a future school committee meeting? Would that be a separate committee that would meet? How do you envision that process moving forward? I would love if it's been considered already, more details on that.
So great question, Stephen. I think part of it is having school committee representation on the task force itself is the consideration or the mechanism that Dr. Fortuna was thinking there. But I think it's also looking at all the things that you all hear when you're out and about, all the reports, all the information that's for us. And again, I think, and I was smiling here as Thomas was giving his report, especially when we got to the part about immersion, because Suzanne, 2 years ago, I think, asked me about, what's your legacy or what's the impact that you want to leave on Brookline? And I think at the time I talked about dual language immersion programs. So I'm pleased to hear that type of conversation is getting a little bit more traction around the table, and not to, again, preempt and say that's the direction we're going. But I do like this notion of biliteracy, bilingualism, and again, that notion around the seal of biliteracy. I think that's low-hanging fruit for us, certainly, but I think that's the way we're presently thinking about it, Stephen, is that having school committee representation on the task force. But this isn't certainly a one and done or one off. This will be, because of the magnitude of the implication, this is something that will be front and center for us as we progress.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Helen.
I'm sorry about that. So I'm a little concerned about immersion. I think it's a great idea if we could give it to everybody. But I have a feeling the cost of that would be astronomical. I also worry that, to me, I want to see all kids be exposed and have the opportunity to learn a second language, become proficient. And I fear that, from what I heard from the report, I think the bigger question is how do we fix what we have and make it better and make it so that both parents, teachers, and students, because I didn't hear students' reports in this, I just heard parents and teachers, feel good about what we have. It's not to say we shouldn't have an immersion program, but I think that we're underestimating the cost of that and what that would mean and who would end up being in it. Because I can see that some parents would know about it right away and make sure their kids were there, and others wouldn't. So anyway, those would be my concerns. I'm thankful that we're going to have a task force. I hope that we'll ponder all these questions, find out the costs, find out what makes sense for Brookline, and hopefully come back to us with some recommendations.
Mariah?
Thanks. I just wanted to say that that I hope that we don't make any decisions before the task force has the time to do their work. I mean, whether the cost of something or assuming any of those things, we need to wait and see what the actual facts on the ground are.
I agree with that sentiment, Mariah. And I would also add that for me, as with anything, what's important is the quality of the program, how effective it is, whether it's meeting worthy goals, not so much just having a program exist in and of itself for the sake of having it. So I want our language program to really thrive, not just exist on threads. And so I'm hopeful that this task force will have the thoughtful discussions in order to try to boost it and have our students be biliterate. Adelia?
So I'm also delighted that there's a task force. I have heard loud and clear, though, that teachers have concerns now for their schedules, fears. So I would love for there to be a parallel process. I know Stephen's been quite bringing that up, and that the task force thinks long-term, but there's also, some very short-term concrete ways to hear from teachers, address some of the, not having to teach 7 levels, several grades, and all of that, because I have heard the teachers tell us that, part of the challenge is that we're not addressing those root causes. So I kind of don't want us to, I don't want us to do a task force that is looking really at redesign and not addressing the immediate needs. So maybe the task force can have both long-term and very short-term goals, and just saying that, we've heard your concerns, and we all, I think everybody here really, really wants this to work because we value world languages. Thank you.
I'm also assuming that there would be teachers on this task force. So
These three people that so eloquently presented tonight are on our task force.
all right, excellent.
And also general ed teachers, because we've got to figure out how to make that work, and maybe a special ed teacher or two, because I'm concerned about inclusion and exclusion. So I don't want to make the task force too large so it's unworkable, but I think there are a lot of stakeholders, and somehow we have to include as many as we can.
And hopefully the high school coordinator would be on this, or a teacher, or both.
Rachel will be, as well as Tanya, of course. So
Right. I volunteer.
So on the question of special education and pullouts in general, and I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but realistically, students need to be pulled out at some point. So how does that part work? And would this task force be addressing that, even though it obviously includes a non-language component?
I think the task force needs to be poised to make recommendations about that. And it's, how we view world language, right? And how we view the education of the whole child. And, I think right now we're making the decision because currently world language isn't considered a core academic subject. So right now, I think we're making that decision so students aren't missing core tier 1 instruction, but that's definitely something that we can look at and explore.
Can I just pipe in on that one too, David? I think that has to be considered alongside the broader topic of scheduling. I mean, we paid for that giant report on BHS scheduling. I don't see how we can consider that apart from the issue of scheduling, which seems like the root disease of the problems that are born by the World Language Program. I just don't see how it could be resolved at the World Language Program level.
You're absolutely right, Stephen. It goes beyond the world language and will extend to the broader middle school scheduling, elementary school scheduling, the number of minutes we have in the day in order to teach. And I think part of what's happening with world language with their schedules, where they have so many different touch points, Natalia, to your point, is that the different sizes, right, of the puzzle pieces, it's hard to fit to complete a full schedule. So that's definitely something that we need to look at in the context of the schedule, because all of this has to happen within a finite amount of time. So we have finite resources of time, people, and funds. And how can we create the best program possible given those finite resources, and having to learn the parameters of what those resources are. Some are known right now and some will be uncovered, such as the cost for different program models.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like one takeaway for me is recommendation 3 saying that if we're gonna have a more equitable culture around the World Language Program, it can't be considered a program that's the buffer that allows for pullouts, and that's downstream from scheduling. So I'm just repeating myself now. So I think we're all on the same page on this.
One question I have for Mr. Sauer, or Dr. Sauer, sorry, if you could share with us, in your experience, what is the minimum amount of instruction time per week that's needed for effectively teaching a language?
If I knew that answer. Yeah, there's no way I can give you that number, unfortunately. Because I also don't believe you could, if you ask a first grade teacher how much minimum number of minutes I need to get these math concepts, they wouldn't want to give you a number either. There's so many factors. I think you can do a lot, even with little, with effective instruction. You can do a lot with little, with teachers who don't have some of the complications they have in Brookline. Even in 60 minutes. I mean, the quote unquote standard has always been 90 minutes. That's been since the early 90s when the first two research published their book on elementary school world language programs. But we don't have enough research to support that in a positive way or in a negative way. So, but that seems to be fairly common. But then there's plenty of programs who do it every single day. They figure it out. Because yeah, they just figure it out. And I think I don't know anything about Brookline's regular, general education program, but I have been to thousands and thousands of classrooms in hundreds and hundreds of schools, language and non. And I was working as an elementary school principal. I know we waste a lot of time in schools on a lot of things, and there's lots of minutes in a day to be found if you're really honest about it. So that would be my answer.
All right, anyone else? Well, thank you very much for coming and for providing us with this very thorough presentation. And thank you to our 3 teachers who came as well. That was extremely helpful. And there will certainly be more discussions on this and the formation of the task force. And we will excitedly revisit this topic in the near future. All right, so that brings us to a discussion of the FY 2025 budget development with Dr. Givens and Mariah.
Susan, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
Okay. So at last week's well, let me take one step back. Every year, the school committee votes a budget calendar. Several years ago, we made the decision to simplify the voting of the budget calendar, to boil it down to 4 key dates. There is a complete finance calendar that is provided as well, but that is always, as one can imagine, a shifting target. And so just the 4 dates are voted. This year, let me pull them up, sorry. This year, the 4 dates that we're talking about are January 12th, 2024, for when the initial budget request would be available. January 18th, 2024, which is the presentation to school committee of the superintendent's FY25. Oh, I shouldn't have said FY24. I should have said FY25 initial budget request available. Then the 18th is presentation to school committee by the superintendent of the FY25 initial budget request. That presentation includes public comment. That's actually on the note on the second page, but that presentation includes public comment, which was a suggestion from Stephen several years ago to increase opportunities for community engagement with the budget and to make them earlier. February 1st would be the school committee's public hearing on the FY25 initial budget request, and that is a requirement of state law. And February 8th, 2024 would be the school committee's, the date that we would vote to send the initial budget request to the town administrator. And state or town bylaws say that the budget has to be transmitted by the 15th, and so that's why we vote the 8th. So again, we're just talking about the 4 dates that are highlighted in yellow on page 1 of the document that you received. And last week, Finance Subcommittee reviewed this and voted unanimously to recommend that the school committee adopt the calendar.
Nice.
So quiet, I've stunned you all into
Well,
silence.
just there are, no, this is great, but I just to, not nitpick, but there's quite a few, I think, where you have the wrong dates. I mean, you
I
have 20.
know.
Okay,
I
so
know.
just, so you know, okay.
But ignore any wrong dates. It should just be the FY. I think I have FY24 written in one spot. It should just be the FY25 date, right? Don't look at their only dates we're voting are the 4. So I'm not sure where other wrong dates might be. There shouldn't be, but the one spot that I know is where it says January 12th, 2024. It says FY24 initial budget book. It should be FY25.
Maria, just a quick question. I mean, clearly I am a first time. Is this the same sort of schedule that we've done in previous years? Is there anything
Yeah.
different?
No,
Okay,
it's
so
just
there's nothing
rolling the dates.
controversial. Okay, all right.
Just rolling the dates forward by a year.
Okay.
Yes, but what usually happens, and Mariah can attest to this too, is the numbers change because the legislature doesn't get their budget together. We'll know the House one is the governor's budget. And then, you know, the House of Representatives in Mass Legislature then does their budget. They don't finish until, it could be any time. So it really becomes very difficult. The years when they've been able, and this is something we need to speak to our legislators about, when they've been able to do the Chapter 70 funding ahead of time, helps us in terms of planning and being able to then do our budget. But that didn't happen last year, and it hasn't happened in a number of years. So it's, you know, it's a moving target, to say the best, and we hope to get it done.
Oh, to your point, Helen, I was going to say that the budget calendar, the dates we're talking about, I'll refer to the initial budget request exactly because the revenues are still being determined, but also the budget itself is being refined on the PSB administrative side as well.
And also the town. So oftentimes the town will find out that the state has more money and then, you know.
Well, that's right on the revenue side, I'm saying.
On the
Like,
revenue
that's all on the
side.
revenue side, but I'm saying on our side, we're still refining perhaps the expense request as well.
And just to explain that a little further, I mean, we can certainly talk about this offline, but the group insurance contract, the GIC, that doesn't get determined till the middle of March. So there's usually a placeholder that the town puts in, but oftentimes, not always, but most of the time, I think, it's higher than what it actually is. So that's another $250,000, $300,000 more in our budget that we don't know about when we're doing the budget. So there's a lot of moving pieces that we eventually bake the cake, but it certainly takes a long time.
In the
Alright,
past couple of years, I would just add, it's not on here, but in the past couple of years, what happens is the revenues and the expenses, to Helen's point, shake out, and then we vote a final budget number in early-ish May before town meeting takes up the budget.
Okay, any further questions, comments? All right, thank you very much, Mariah. We will then move on to.
Are we going to vote it or no?
Yeah, can I move the calendar?
Well, this is the first reading.
Oh.
So we usually move it on the second reading. So we will now move on to overview of superintendent's 2023-24 goals and priorities and update on the district strategic plan.
All right, good evening again. What I want to do is give a very drafty draft look at the goals that I'm thinking about. These are definitely still in refinement mode there, so I will share with you prior to our next, to the October 12th meeting, my finalized work, but this is just to give you some idea. So each year, so last year, if you recall, I wrote 2-year goals. And so some of these are a continuation of the 2-year goals. This is the one on supervision and evaluation. But the focal point of the work this year will be in the area of student engagement. So I really want to work with principals on my visits looking at or digging into student engagement. The second goal that I'm looking at is department reorganization for the Office of Educational Equity for wider district impact, capacity, and alignment with district values. So if you recall from last year, we took a look at reorganizing the Administration and Finance Office and some part of the strategy portion. And so this year, I'm looking to do something similar with educational equity. So Claire and I are still working on funneling this up or feeding these two together. And the other thing, and the central level team we're looking at is, do we have capacity without plussing up the budget right now through existing positions to create sort of a chief of staff or a chief strategy officer? I'm still kicking that around, given the number of central level positions that have been reduced over the years, but that body of work hasn't been reduced. And so sometimes these things are just floating around like dangling participles, and it isn't until something falls or slips through the cracks that we say, well, where does that report or where does that align? So I want to do some more work in fleshing that out as well. And then a big body of work that we're looking at in support of the strategic plan is the notion of district coherence. How do we work to get all of our systems and parts working together to get to make sure that we are working towards continuous improvement? And so the model that I've grabbed up here, some of you may be familiar with the PELP framework out of Harvard University. This is looking at the instructional core or instruction at the middle. What's our theory of change? What's our strategy? And then how do all of these system resources, our structures, culture, structure, systems, resources, work together then to support our instruction? So what's happening in the classroom? How do we drive and improve that? And we'll do a little bit deeper dive later on the MCAS results as one example, but we think about that as a pressure point or a data point, but then how are our students doing across the system or organization? So looking at instruction, looking at our school improvement plans, looking at our capital improvement plans, looking at our budget, all of those things working together and in the form of a bigger, larger strategy. And then goal 4 is what I'll be starting to work on with the school committee, is the notion of the governance core. The superintendent, I'm planning to lead you all in exploring this book by Campbell and Fullen on the governance core. And again, this notion of how do we work together as superintendent and school committee to make sure that we're constantly focused on continuous improvement for the system. And so for this first dive into this, I think I want to look at the first 4 chapters of the book with you all. So I'll be giving some homework out pretty soon before the workshop so that we can start digging into this and working with Betsy to actually get the text to you. So those are the 4 goals that I've drafted up at this point. And then for the update on the strategic plan, we're in the process, now that you all have voted, the mission, vision, core values, and goals, incorporating that into the template. We're going to refine the action plans that work with the central team, bringing it to the school committee for review and feedback, taking it out to the community for review and feedback. Then we're going to create that's going to be one of the big projects for Neil, is to generate a brochure format that we can share out about the strategic plan, and then the school committee will adopt, and then at that point we disseminate or begin acting upon it. So the goal is to get this all launched, packaged up before we get out of the fall. So we're still working to get this in place while again our budget process is unfolding, but at the same time, you know, looking at these all of these various systems for greater continuity, and again the word that we'll start using, coherence, and those are not necessarily synonymous with alignment, but we will be also getting things aligned as well. So coherence is more focused on this notion of leveraging strategy to move the system forward. So with that, I will take some questions. Again, this is very draft at this point, but this is where the thinking is. I'm also waiting. I've given principals their deadline of October 6th, I think, to get their goals in, as well as the senior team. So we'll be working together on all of those pieces. So I'll take any questions you may have.
Questions, anyone? Go ahead, Suzanne.
So the district coherence feels awfully big to me. And I noticed on that one, you didn't have either next steps, key actions.
Yep.
So it would just help me, I know this is just a draft, if you could put a few more parameters around that, what that means.
Sure.
It feels really big.
It is big, and again, it's a multi-year process
Okay.
there. So I think one of the things that I'm thinking about, you know, as an example, and not to go down this rabbit hole of discussion, but sort of the notion that we had around the Brookline High School class sizes. And when we're thinking about at the point that the schedule is built, it's after the budgeting process or the course selection process is there. So what might be the processes we start putting in place to get that that process in front of the budget build process? Because once we go through, as Helen was talking about, a long budget process, and then at the end of that, we have our high school, our course selection. But again, it's codified in the town, in our town bylaws, that we have to get our budget in so early. So then what then become the strategies for recognizing that portion of our budget build process? But then we're also launching our enrollment study. So again, that's going to now give us timely information so that then we can use some projections or think about contingencies around that. I'm also thinking about the school improvement process or the school improvement plan process. Right now, the timing of that is off. So how then do we synchronize those plans so that that the team is working in advance of the budgeting season, but then they're also using all relevant data to inform that process. So that's what the work will be over a number of years. And so what I want to do is identify the pieces that we want to focus on for this year.
Okay.
But it will be a multi-step, a multi-year process.
Right, but you'll like kind of identify
Absolutely.
those. That will help a lot, I think.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned the building administrators having their goals
Mhm.
another week or so. Is it based on this district coherence? What are they looking at to come up with their goals?
So they are looking
The strategic
more
plan?
toward the strategic planning
Okay,
work,
and they
as
could-
well as their specific work that they want to engage in their buildings.
In their building?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So a number of
I know they've
them-
been working on that, right?
Right. A number of them have, done the work grading for equity. Some of those are working there. So those become examples of what's unique to their building
Right.
also.
And then your first goal, that feedback on student engagement. Key actions. I guess I have to look at this a little more. But again, that would be something I would think that building administrators would probably be involved with as well.
Or yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because again, this also feeds into the arc of learning, because we're focusing on student questions, I'm sorry, observation and feedback and student questioning also. So this is going to be sort of the lens that I focus on, but their arc of learning for the year, the professional development that we have set up for them for the year.
For the administrators,
For the
the building
building
administrators, right,
principals, yes.
including their work conference they're going to
Yep,
on
that's
instructional
instructional
coaching.
coaching, yeah.
Yeah, which is fabulous, so.
Can you talk a little more about what you mean by calendar audits?
So what I do there is how much time are you spending in the classroom? So how much time are you spending as an instructional leader? And so again, that notion of how do we get out of sort of the focusing so heavily on operations and duties and those types of things, to having our leaders engage in that, what we were just talking about with Thomas, with this notion of being in classrooms, giving feedback, hearing instruction, seeing instruction, and all those types of things. So a calendar audit is a great way to sit down and say, how are you actually scheduling and budgeting your time? So that's another mechanism to say, much like I share with you, how much time I'm out in schools and classrooms visiting with folks, I want principals to also share that experience with me as well.
All right. Anyone else? Go ahead, Natalia.
Second goal, and it sort of aligns to, like, the department is a small department, we've heard, but the goals of, the district on issues around, I mean, one of the issues we brought up is that it can't be centralized. So I wonder if you can ask, the school administrators to also have some goal. I mean, I feel like you shouldn't narrowly think about it as just your team, but how it intersects with, I had sort of suggested that there should be someone at the level of like a vice principal that is responsible for diversity equity. Otherwise, your one person will burn out again. Like, so somehow thinking about this reorganization, not from a very small, but department reorganization and how it connects to and builds leadership across the schools. Like, I think it's a fundamental, yeah. So just encouraging you to think about this bigger than just the central department.
That's great feedback. And Claire also has some thinking about that notion of how do we have leaders in the building with that as well. So radar, yeah. Yeah.
Helen? Oh, I thought you had something to say. Okay, sorry. Mariah?
Stephen
Mariah,
had his
then
hand.
Stephen.
Stephen had his hand up first.
All right, go ahead, Stephen.
Mariam. I was on the topic of goal number 2 also. I would love to hear more about what you're thinking, even if in drafts you draft about a chief of staff or chief strategy officer position. Would that be outside of the Office of Educational Equity? Would that be
Oh, great question, Stephen. And I'm sorry, I just threw it in there. So yes, that does not fall within that office. That becomes a separate entity unto itself.
Would
So
that be linked to equity, or is that separate from equity altogether?
no, it's separate. It's separate from equity because when I was drafting this up, I also, again, this is why it's drafty draft. If you remember last year, I wrote the reorg for A&F and the data office as well. I wrote them together. And so this was just a reminder for myself not to lose sight of that.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, then just on the topic of goal 2, following up with what Natalie has said, I would love to, as you're solidifying your thoughts, for you to present out what you're thinking organizationally about the Office of Educational Equity. Like Natalie was saying, I think the 2-person office is we've struggled with it. We struggled with it last year. We struggled with the 1-person office previously. I know I came out swinging for a larger office, but I think what I really am coming out swinging for is just taking a good hard look at our organizational structure around educational equity, given how we're burning people out, how we're not setting people up for success. So hearing your thoughts as they're evolving, I think would be really interesting for us and give us an opportunity to talk with you about them before they're put into practice. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Mariah?
Thanks. For this one, I just want to point out something that you just were talking about too, Linus, which is that last year the goal was to reorg A&F, and I don't think that work is completed yet.
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess I don't, if we're doing department reorgs, I'm hoping that we're not going to like that we'll continue to highlight that one is still in process as opposed to just moving on to the next one.
No, that's fair, Mariah. And so, because when I went back and looked at what I shared last year, those were written as 2-year goals. And so I think the notion of just carrying that forward to say where we are in that process. So that's helpful context. So I can definitely lift that one back up.
That would be great. And then do you mind going back to goal 1? I think I had a comment. Just that I'm really excited to see this. I know that this was talked about last year. And I think one of the things that I find confusing is that when you go to the DESE website, there's like a chart where you report on who gets evaluated, how many people were eligible and how many people are actually evaluated. And it would be really valuable to understand on evaluation how free, if we're doing annual evaluation of everybody or how this works. And so what is our goal number and what do we achieve? I think that would be really helpful as well to understand in your benchmarks. Do you mind going to goal 3, I think it is? Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and we had talked about this one at finance last week in terms of the SIPs, which you were just talking about as well. And I think it'll be great to have all the gears catching on things. And then I think, what was goal 4? Sorry, I didn't have, it went by so quickly. Oh, and yeah, I'm excited to hear about this too. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll just say the question you raise about the DESE website is an interesting one in terms of how we track and report that data. And so there's a lot of work that has to happen there because, well, I'll just say it directly. Our systems are antiquated and not current. And that's also speaking to our evaluation system, the evaluation document that we have negotiated. So there's a whole body of work that we need to take up there because the way the system currently reports, it's a manual system essentially because of what I think was negotiated some time ago. Because we have the right structure or system, but we're not using that capacity with the way I believe our system was negotiated. If I'm saying that incorrectly, Jody, correct me. So there's some work that has to be done there. So to your point, Mariah, every new staff member, let's just talk about teaching professionals. Every teaching professional that's new gets evaluated annually. But every one of our professional staff members get evaluated on a biannual system where it's a 2-year cycle, and the midway through or the end of the first year is a formative, and then the end of the second year becomes the summative. So it's just a matter of the frequency. If I'm a professional status person, my evaluation is less frequent. If I'm new, I get many more in that regard. So.
In terms of the antiquated nature of the system, are you referring more to the form of it, it sounded like, but not necessarily the substantive part, or both?
Both, because I think our alignment to the standards that we're using is also old as well. So there's another thing that we need to pick up.
All right. Anyone else?
Thank you. And thank you all for your reflections and your feedback and your questions. Very helpful as well.
All right, so we will now move on to school committee actions. review and possible vote to approve memorandum of agreement with the Brookline Educators Union for unified sports coaching stipends. Dr. Givens, would you like to explain this one?
I'm sorry. I'm having some problems with my sound. Can you hear me?
We hear you now. Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you repeat? Because I just.
So right now we're discussing the possible vote to approve the memorandum of agreement with the Brookline Educators Union for unified sports coaching stipends.
Yes, thank you. So we're very excited to be able to offer a wonderful program that has not been available to students with some physical challenges. And memorandum of agreement will allow us to be able to hire and pay coaches to be able to oversee that program.
Lisa, do you want to add any more to that? I think you're on mute as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, this request pertains to the memorandum of understanding with the BEU for the addition of 3 stipended positions in order to support the district's unified basketball program that we hope to get off the ground this fall. We are eager to get started. We have 27 students and families that have signed up. A league schedule has been developed. Feedback from students, community, staff has been so positive, and everyone is so excited to get started. I have to commend Kyle Williams, the commitment of the entire athletic department, their level of investment in getting this program off the ground has just been absolutely wonderful. And as interest grows, we just hope to expand the sports choices that we can offer. But this is the start. This is our pilot, and we appreciate your consideration and your support.
And the positions that are being added, I believe, is a head coach position and an assistant coach position, is what the MOU speaks to. And so that's a class 3 position for the head coaches in baseball, softball, soccer, field hockey, volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics, lacrosse, crew, swimming, spring trainer, and then assistant coaches for football. 2 offensive and defensive coordinators are in the class 3 group of coaches. And in the class 5, where the assistant coaches would be, is the head coach for sailing, assistant coaches for basketball, wrestling, baseball, softball, soccer, gymnastics, field hockey, lacrosse, swimming, crew, basketball, indoor track, outdoor track, volleyball, ice hockey, and the equipment managers. So those are where those 2, or where the 2 categories of coaches will fall, class 3 and class 5.
So there are 2 categories of coaches, but it's more than 3 coaches total.
Correct. So I believe it's, Lisa, is it 2 head coaches or 1 head and 2 assistants?
1 class 3 and 2 class 5 stipends, 2 coaches and 1 coordinator.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question.
Helen?
So I have a couple questions. I think this is a great idea. I think it's really important for kids, for all kids to be able to participate in some way in sports. My question is, first of all, is the money in the budget for these positions?
Yes, because we voted it as part of the override last year.
Right.
It was part of Kyle's programming.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. I know he asked for the his assistant, but I didn't know about
I was
this.
just going, I'm just pulling up the slide from last year right now.
That's fine. That's fine.
No, I had been already
trust you.
looking at, because I wanted to look back at it. And it said athletics support FY24. Where do we
Oh,
have
that's
this?
Mariah speaking.
Yeah, it's me talking. We
Thank
had, but we had this a little bit different though. We didn't talk about having the stipends broken out on this slide, so I'd have to go back, but we did talk about the building the unified sports programming. So was it just buried in the other costs of that? Okay.
To Helen's broader question, though, we can definitely afford this. It's in the budget.
Yes.
Okay, and are the buses also included? They're playing against other teams in other districts? Is that correct?
Eventually, yes.
So the bus transportation, that's another piece to make sure it's included, let's put it that way. You know, because that can run up to some costs quite a bit. My third question or request, I haven't seen the stipends lately from, maybe it was in the last contract that we voted. But I know that we've historically been very low on our sports stipends. It's not a district that always puts the money there. And so I'm curious, could we get a copy of that? Yes.
Sure. So the class 3 stipends that we're talking
I
about.
know they're small
Yeah,
amounts.
but yeah, we can definitely give you the ones that are updated in the contract.
Yeah,
the new
I
contracts,
think that would be good, so we all have a sense of what we're investing in sports or not
Yep.
investing in sports.
Now, Mariah, I see that you have a hand up. Was that to make a separate point from the one you just made?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Well, just going back to that point, it was not budgeted in the override as a separate non-salary line. Like we had FTEs associated with it. So I should say I'll say it was not budgeted as a non-FTE. So we didn't have stipends in there, just for whatever that is worth.
But on the other hand, I'm sure in our budget, we would be able to find the amounts that are necessary for these 3 positions. I just think we need to think about it for next
Absolutely.
year. Especially if the
Well,
program
but it's not
grows.
just 3, right? I mean, the point is there was umpteen sports listed earlier, and all of this is awesome, and we want to do these things, but it's just flagging that the stipends weren't included. My other question, well, first off, I'm excited about this, and I think it's great, and it's what we had talked about last year, even if the dollars aren't exactly in there the way we had described them, but they are in there. My other question, and this is just like a practical question, is how does this document get saved so that it's incorporated into the contract going forward? This is a very boring, mundane question, but given that we've just gone through this and had all of our contracts, I thought they were all just rebuilt so that they were intact. How does this get?
It's a moving target.
So typically, if I can respond, typically as you go through, after you've settled a contract, if you have these agreements, that when you go into the next round of negotiation, they get folded into the agreement the next time around. So I will keep track of each one of these agreements between the union and the board. I keep them, collected, and then that at the next round of negotiations, we will add those to the document itself.
Do they get appended to the one that's posted on the PSB website?
Not
as well?
typically.
Okay. Okay.
I move the question.
All right, I'll second. Natalia, your vote? Yes. Suzanne?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Enthusiastic, yes.
Stephen?
Just regular, yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, now we
Thank
will.
you very much.
Thank you. We will now move on to discussion and possible vote on FY 2024 food service fees.
Thank you. So we discussed this at Finance Subcommittee last week. We had a wonderful presentation by Sasha, who was here earlier, Director of Food Services, and Susan. There's a memo that is in the packet that you all received on this. And I'm just going to pull it up myself. So I have it handy because I just switched away from it. So the memo that you received talks about the costs of what we had done last year for FY23. So if you recall, what we had done was we had heard from PTOs that there were students who were eligible for free and reduced lunch, and however, the free and reduced lunch status did not apply to second meals or a la carte items that they were getting at school. And so they were accruing debt on their accounts with food services. So we took a vote last year to wipe the debt of that year from those accounts and to waive costs going forward for students with free and reduced lunch eligibility. And then to come back and see how much the cost of that was in the year before we decide how to proceed going forward. So the cost, as you can see in the memo that we received, and that's for the full school year. So even though it's until June 21st, I think that's because that was the last day of school, was $10,756 total. And the discussion that we had at finance was a few key points, and people who were there, if you think I forgot something, let me know. One point was making sure that because first lunch is now free for everyone, making sure that there was sufficient communication for families who are eligible for free and reduced lunch to also receive this status. And we talked about some of the things that food services does to communicate to families on the value of still applying for free and reduced lunch status, even if first lunch is still free. And this is one of the benefits, but there are other opportunities that status affords them as well. And we talked about, goodness, I just forgot the second big point of, that overall the food services revolving fund is, I think Sasha said it brought in something like $4 million last year. And it's in the positive. And so this amount of money represents a very, very small fraction of the total and does not represent the account going into debt or anything like that. And so Finance Subcommittee voted unanimously to recommend that the school committee vote to waive these charges again for FY24, which is the current year.
All right.
Move it.
Okay, so a second. Thank you, Suzanne. Natalia, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that now brings us to subcommittee and liaison reports. Helen, go ahead, Capital.
Thank you. So there's a lot happening in Capitol. We had a Pierce School Building Committee meeting today, a second one. Yes, with design, both interior and exterior being shown. And as soon as our new person who's in charge of our website is up to speed, we're going to get all this posted on the website. I'm sorry, I apologize for it not being there already. However, what I'd like to do is at the end of design development, I'd like to, which is around the end of October, beginning of November, we can try and figure out a date with the architects. I'd like them to come and present to us here at school committee. Today we had at the meeting a beautiful 3D, replica, not replica, what's it called? A model. Thank you. That's the word. See, English is my second language. That's why sometimes words don't come. Anyways, it's a great model of the building. It was at Pierce during the back to school night. Lots of parents saw it. Lots of kids got very excited by it. A little bit got broken. So after our next meeting on October 12th, I think is our next meeting of the school building committee, we'll bring it up here so that people up here can see it. And so I'd like to request that sometime at the end of October, beginning of November, to when it works out for everybody. Driscoll School is moving along. I think it's going to be, will be, as we do with every school, the last few items usually take the longest, and we'll get in there, and our staff will make sure we get in there, but it's going to be it's always a struggle at the beginning to get the temporary certificate of occupancy and then the full certificate of occupancy. I think, and Charlie Simmons will be coming to our next meeting to show pictures of work from the summer work, which was really great, some of the stuff that happened. And I think that's, we had to change our capital subcommittee meeting, which is now scheduled for October 17th.
At what time? Is that the usual 4 o'clock?
Yeah, 4 o'clock. We're keeping the same time. What I was trying to do is take it off of the same night as the building commission meeting, because it means sitting in front of a screen for at least 5 hours. And so but it became complicated, so we're moving around a bit this year, but next year we'll coordinate better with curriculum so that we can do that in a better way.
All right, thank you for that update. Curriculum, Suzanne?
Yeah, we met on September 19th. It was a full meeting. I will give you the topics. It was recorded, so I urge people, if they're interested in a particular topic, to be sure and take a look at the recording. So we talked about summer school numbers. We had 1,151 students enrolled in our summer school program. We talked about the BHS class sizes and some of our concerns about that. We talked about the current world language program and knowing too that there are still staff positions that are posted and open, so we're still looking to hire there. At different schools, they have slightly different configurations of what people are getting, what students are getting for world language. OTL, Office of Teaching and Learning, talked about their goals for next year. They have 7 goals about managing federal grants, looking at the ELA and math assessments, looking to have an ELA, English Language Arts Program overview, looking at child study teams, looking at instructional coaching, looking at the world language design, which we heard about tonight, and looking at the middle school program. Many of those goals are centered around program reviews that we had last year. So Dr. Fortuna has her work cut out for her, but she's ready to do it, so that's great. And then finally, actually 2 quick things. The health clinics that Dr. Guillory mentioned earlier, they're coming up for the flu, and the youth risk behavior survey was presented last night, so I don't actually have those results. I didn't see that. But that should be available. And then the last thing we talked about was the MCAS data, and we will probably present that to the whole school committee, probably end of October, 1st of November, so that you can see that data as well. There have been identified subgroups that have been impacted by large achievement gaps. We are very much aware of that. Certainly acknowledging that, recognizing that, looking to strengthen our Tier 1 instruction, which is our general classroom instruction, but also identifying those students which need extra help and how we can provide that. But we will have a more detailed look at that data in another couple of meetings. And that was pretty much it.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. Sure, go ahead.
Because one of the, and it's not to you, Suzanne, it's to Dr. Guillory,
Okay.
the BHS class size, that was a big part of our conversations. And I wonder if we can schedule something so that we can continue that conversation. It seems that, and Suzanne, correct me if I'm wrong, there seems to be a time that could next semester, meaning like this semester, we can't do anything, but it's not about next year. I don't know, people have been using the term next year, and I'm confused whether we're talking about next academic year, or are we talking about next semester that something can be done? And if it is next semester, like I just want to raise it to you and say I really want to be part of those conversations. And I don't know, Mariah, if finance needs to, like I as the newest member of, like, what happens when something like this happens? Like, are we just stuck, or do we have some funds to think about? Anyways, I would like to understand a little bit what can be done, what the role of school committee can be, other than to tell you that we care deeply about this.
Thank you. I captured the note. When we built this particular budget, we did not build in staff contingencies. But I will follow up with the high school to see if there is a semester adjustment that can be made, or if unfortunately we are stuck with better plan for FY25, but I'll get clarity around that.
So are the classes that have greater than 30 students, do those include semester-only classes, or are
I
these
don't
all
have that
full years?
detail.
All right.
Yep.
It seemed to me from, I don't have the detail either, certainly, but it seemed it was mostly the full year courses.
Okay.
From what the ones that I heard about.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Mariah.
Thanks. I wanted to say that like Natalia, I would like to hear more about this. And I guess I still want a little bit of a forensic. There was no clear answer in curriculum that I heard about how we got from the numbers of the prior years to this year. And I really would appreciate, we did understand in part because of the conversation we had at finance last week, that it wasn't a question of the increments of innovation fund, and it wasn't a question, as I understand, of the few FTEs that were reduced to get from where we were last year to where we were this year. So what I really want to understand is why did it happen? Like, what actually was the reason for it to go so drastically of a change? And then if it can't be fixed for next semester, how are we making sure that it's absolutely fixed for the following fall? Because I didn't hear any of that last week. And I think that that's important information.
Go ahead, Ellen. Oh, sorry.
I was just following up on that but go ahead. You're not.
No, I'll stop for now, but I think after this I have my finance report.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Ellen.
I think what might be helpful is if we could get some sort of understanding of how the schedule is put together, how courses are put together, what happens when you get 50 new students, or if you get 50 new students over the summer, what happens? Sort of understanding the mechanics of it, I think might help us to figure out or know a little bit more about what we can do to help with those things. Because I think many people don't, it's so complicated. It's not, if you think about the master schedule, I think takes a magician to put it together.
And just to share from this week's CPAC meeting, there was particular concern about students with IEPs and 504s lacking access to advanced courses, particularly advanced science courses, as a result of over-enrollment. So the concern about large class sizes and over-enrollment trickles over into equity issues as well.
Stephen, while you're discussing CPAC, do you want to continue about anything else that happened at that meeting?
Let's see. So I served as the liaison from school committee to the CPAC meeting. It's the first CPAC meeting of the year. That issue came up. I don't think there are any other particular issues to report back on right now.
All right, Mariah, finance.
Finance met last Wednesday, the 20th. We've talked about some of the things that we discussed then. We've talked about the budget development calendar earlier. We talked about the budget development priorities and how we would approach that this year, given the strategic plan, and that we wanted to be aligned with the strategic plan, but we weren't sure how we wanted to be aligned yet. And so that's going to be taken up at the workshop when we see the strategic plan, the workshop next month. It's been docketed, I guess, at the workshop for us to then have that discussion as a full school committee, which I think is a great option. We also talked a little bit about school improvement plans, which ties directly into this conversation around coherence that we were having earlier, and the opportunity to communicate with school-based school site council members and principals about syncing up the schedule. And I think Susan and I are going to loop before those conversations start to happen. We need to figure that out. But that was another outcome of the meeting. And I think those were the big outcomes that haven't been discussed already.
All right, thank you. So policy met last, oh, sorry, do you want to go, do you have any updates for accounts payable?
Not right now.
All right. So policy met last Friday morning. We had an abbreviated agenda, which was essentially just two substantive items. One of them was a discussion of our school assignments policy. There have been many emails circulating that I'm sure many of us have received regarding parents expressing concerns that after they move or they are contemplating a move, they are worried about the implications as to whether their children can remain at the school that they had previously attended. There was a draft that was circulated that would have removed the discretion from the district in making that decision to create an automatic right, essentially, for the caregivers to elect for their children to remain at the school of attendance the previous year. There was significant pushback from district staff around that. Some of the concerns expressed by district staff included that in theory, that could mean that somebody attends one school A for kindergarten and now is locked in to school A for the remaining 8 years of that student's elementary school career. And what happens if there's a demographic shift and you have a lot of local students in that neighborhood, and now they're essentially blocked from going to that school because this student spent 1 year there in kindergarten. That's obviously an extreme example, but we can see how that could become an issue. So there were some counter proposals floated about maybe the right time to create that automatic right to stay at the previous school would be middle school. Perhaps it should be a 6th grade cutoff. So those discussions are still a little bit in flux. We did feel at the policy subcommittee level that this is an important discussion for us to have at the full committee. So while there was no recommendation to endorse a particular draft, there was a unanimous vote to refer this policy for further discussion by full school committee. And we will be having this docketed at our next meeting in October. The other item that we discussed at the policy subcommittee meeting was whether we would be making recommendations on town meeting warrant articles. And if so, which warrant articles would the policy subcommittee be referring for consideration by the full committee for potential positions? And by unanimous vote, there were 2 warrant articles that the policy subcommittee is recommending. And I'll note that 2 is far fewer than what we have normally referred to the full committee. And that's partially a function of there being only 19 warrant articles for the fall town meeting, which is less than half of what we've been accustomed to the last 3 years. So the 2 warrant articles that we recommended for referral to the full school committee are warrant articles 10 and 13. 13, we're all very familiar with already. That's the Heath renaming. And so the intention is, rather than having a full-fledged public meeting around warrant article 13 that we're already well acquainted with, we're going to have Andy give a very quick summary about warrant article 13. Andy's already signed up to speak at town meeting on behalf of the school committee. And the intent is that he will have a statement that he's going to deliver at town meeting, and that statement, or something very close to it, will likely be the statement that we approve as a committee to be included in the combined reports at town meeting. The second warrant article that we voted for referral is warrant article 10. That is a warrant article where the select board is the petitioning body. And I'll read the summary of warrant article 10. The Ridley School project is complete, and there is a surplus in the project budget. This article allows the town to redirect funds already borrowed to a project for any purpose for which a loan may be incurred for an equal or longer period of time than that for which the original loan was issued. The article also allows the town to rescind the remaining authorized but unissued amount. So this warrant article, the policy subcommittee felt there could be very clear relevance to the schools. In fact, they explicitly use the money left over from the Ridley project as an example. And I think at minimum, we're going to want to have a better understanding of how that would work, what would be the circumstances under which a remainder on a loan could be reassigned, who should exactly have say on that. So I do think that we will want to have a public hearing on that warrant article, invite the petitioner to come and present. It's a select board. So probably somebody from the select board will come.
Melissa.
And it could be Melissa. Okay, and discuss that with us. And then
Sorry, who's
following,
the petitioner, David?
the select board's a petitioner. But the select board might have been the petitioner at the recommendation of Melissa and the town finance. So we'll learn more, assuming that the school committee decides to vote on having a potential statement on that warrant article. So I'll go ahead and move that we schedule 2023 special town meeting warrant articles for public hearing, and that those warrant articles be warrant article 10 and warrant article 13. Start second. Thank you, Natalia. Natalia, your vote? Suzanne?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes, and I also have a question later.
And I also vote yes. Go ahead, Mariah, your question?
My question was, and I haven't read the warrant article explanations or anything, but was part of the explanation including refunding the capital account that was drained for the Ruffin Ridley construction?
Interesting.
So
Yes.
that's not in the summary explanation. The summary explanation was just that brief paragraph I read to you. And that's one of the reasons why I think having the public hearing on this will be illuminating, so we learn more about what's the motive behind this, what's the intention, who will have control over these funds.
Okay.
So that's certainly a very good question.
Thank you.
An interesting question because I don't, in my recollection, when we've had surpluses in building projects, town meeting has never voted that.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll find out more.
How much was the surplus for Ridley, do you remember?
I want to say like 2 million, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that. It's sort of complicated because I think they don't borrow it until they need it. So I'm not sure there's money in the bank here. I think it's bonding capacity, but we need to find out.
In terms of additional liaisons and updates, Stephen, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm just going to briefly mention that I was at a recent local town political event, the Tommy Vitolo birthday at Hamilton. And while there were quite a number of people, 4 people came up to me and were talking about how enthusiastic they are regarding these sustainability panels that are being convened. And that was a major topic of conversation for a lot of people.
That is very exciting.
So Stephen, if you have any further remarks about sustainability.
Sure. I'll talk about that in one other thing. So yeah, so I'll just update on the mechanics of that. So we've decided to have chairs for each of the subgroups and for each of the groups, and that's to facilitate coordination. So the chairs will be Christy Electris, Eric Colburn, Roger Grandy, and Dean Cody, and they will meet with me as the school committee representative monthly, and that will be just to reduce duplication and to facilitate liaising with town and school committee and administration representatives. They are also reaching out to schedule the launch of their groups and the cadence of their group meetings now. And I've also met with some town groups, including CAB and ZIAB, to alert them to this task force. We get a lot of enthusiastic receptions and offers of services and inputs. So things are off to a ginger start, but I think there's a lot of optimism. I also wanted to share out that I spoke to Malcolm Cawthorn as the Metco liaison, and he wanted to suggest to the school committee. So November 3rd is the district professional development day, and he wanted to know whether the school committee might be interested in a tour of Metco headquarters, which is also a history tour. And the CEO calls it Metco 101. It focuses a lot on the role of Dr. Leon Trilling, who was the chair of the school committee
Brookline.
and in Brookline. I don't know how much can the entire school committee attend such a thing? Would that sort of thing be noticed? I mean, it's not like we'd be debating an issue that would come up for a vote.
When I've talked about it with Millie, who's the CEO of Metco, she has said that other school committees actually hold their, they hold it, they do this on the day of a regular school committee meeting, and they actually do their school committee meeting from Metco.
Huh. Well, I just wanted to put it out there as either an opportunity for a tour, or as Mariah says, an opportunity for something more than that, but something to consider. So that's
Was there a potential date that was mentioned?
yeah, November 3rd is the date he proposes. And that's because that's the district PD day.
Oh,
So I think that's a pretty cool opportunity.
oh, November the 3rd. Oh.
All right, thank you for that update, Stephen. Are there any other updates?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Helen.
So I attended the STEPS first board meeting of the year this year, and there's a new director with a lot of new energy, which is wonderful. Her name is Nia Jacobs, and there's also a number of new staff in STEPS Inc. I think our staff has been pretty constant, but their staff, I think, has had more of a turnover lately. You know, they're trying to regroup and make sure that they're doing well by the students they have, but also looking at moving down to K through 2 and what sort of programming makes sense for K through 2. Trying to think what else. They have a family engagement counselor who's working on really trying to work with, reinvigorate the parent groups that used to be there. There's a couple, it's interesting, on the board of STEPS, there's 2, maybe 3 graduates of STEPS who are on the board now. It's really sort of heartwarming to know that it works, you know, it really makes a difference for a number of students' lives. So I think it would be great. She's just started, so I'm not sure right now would be a good time, but maybe sometime in January to have her come and talk to us together with our Sophia, right now I'm going to blank on her last name. Say it once more. St. Louis. That they could both come and present the STEPS program, how things have gone over the last few years with the pandemic. I think it's been a while since we've had somebody come and talk to us, so. And what their plans are for coming up.
All right, thank you.
Oh,
You have another
as
one?
long as I'm talking.
Sure.
One of the things that we used to have in the past was a calendar of events in the town, mostly school events, that I think would be helpful, Betsy, if you don't mind. I mean, we need to tell you what they are, or you may know some of them, but stuff like the Innovation Fund is having their 25th anniversary event. Help me, somebody, on what date? Oh, the date of our school committee meeting, which is really a problem. But anyways, people should go to it. It'll be at Tappan Street on, help me, the 26th of October. The Brookline Education Foundation is honoring the head of, I'm sorry? Dan Bresman, the head of School Within a School. And does somebody know the date? I just got the October 20th. Oh, okay. The 20th? Okay, so was it the 20th? And then the Senior Center is having their event this fall, their gala. which is always a good thing to have a few school committee members who might be able to go. So those are the things I know about, but I think it would be good to try and keep that because it then gets out as public, with our, we used to do it and then it sort of got lost for a while when there weren't events. But now that there are events again, I think it'd be a good idea. Thank you.
All right, any other liaison? Go ahead, Natalia.
Just a quick one, the Advisory Council on Public Health, which is why I missed finance, and I raised it with Mariah. Unfortunately, they're scheduled at the same time. I'm going to try and see if ACPH can move their time a little bit, but I'll for future meetings. But the big things, heat, we discussed heat a little bit, and so if school committee wanted to do some planning or thinking, ACPH members, there's several pediatricians that are willing to come and sort of an advisory and sort of think through the heat issues that we went through because before June. So they're not, ACPH doesn't feel, or in the health department, that they should be leading this. It's schools, facilities, really understanding, because it's those questions. But if any expertise is helpful, they're willing to help with that. And the other thing is COVID. They don't have any more tests. Like Segal is applying to try and get a few thousand. But I heard through the grapevine that there is ARPA funding that was kind of clawed back. There only 4. You get 4. An entire household gets 4. So I am a household of 5. I went through, me and my husband, no, we spent like $400 just so we could send the kids to school every single day. Because I got sick, then my husband got sick, and I was testing 3 kids every day. So that was $30 a day. And it was for 10 days, that's $300. And then he got, so, and that's me being conscientious and because I can afford it. But really schools, if schools don't have tests, which they don't, and I think we should think about it. Anyways, that's obviously not, I don't know if you've heard of any teachers being out, but the kids, there are, but also we just don't know because testing is so expensive now that we will, and the schools don't have tests and the health department doesn't have tests. So just raising that as something that, if there is a way for us, or I will continue looking into it. It doesn't need to be anybody else, but I'm quite aware that the financial burden on families is huge if they want to do the right thing. The nurses didn't ask us to do it. They said we could send the kids in even when I was sick and when my husband was sick. They said just test after 5 days, but I thought that, that wasn't fair to everybody else. So, anyways.
All right, anyone else? Go ahead.
Just a question. Does Medicaid cover the test?
I don't know. I don't know.
Either.
I mean, you can get tests like at clinics, like those are covered usually even with your insurance, but it's not the ones that you
It
can buy
doesn't.
at CVS.
It doesn't cover anything at the insurance doesn't cover.
Insurance covers it if you go to your doctor and they do a test for you, but not the buying from CVS. That's done too. That used to be under the emergency order that ended in May. So right now, insurance doesn't reimburse either.
I see.
Or the over-the-counter ones.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, is there any? Go ahead,
Can I ask
Mariah.
a question just about COVID too? The clinics that were mentioned earlier are just for flu. And Linus, you mentioned that there would be upcoming, I think you said there'd be upcoming COVID clinics. Or did you say that? And I
Yes,
guess, okay, you did, right?
I did say that, but Tricia is working with the health department to get those scheduled, and those haven't been announced yet for us.
Okay. Okay. I guess my question was they're not doing joint COVID flu clinics.
No, and that's because the health department thinks it's complicated. Already there are 4 different flu vaccines that they offer, which is high dose, the spray and then 2 different ones that it's just, different. They don't want to make any mistakes. They think that offering both could be a challenge. And the new COVID vaccine, when they had set up the flu ones, it hadn't been yet approved. So these have been in the makings for a while. I think they're going to have to go for a vendor for COVID vaccines, whereas the flu ones are run by the health department and volunteers, the MRC and stuff, but not the COVID ones are going to be with a vendor like Star Market or something. I'm not sure. But yeah.
All I can say is that I've been trying to schedule vaccines for my family. It's been very difficult, at least for me. And so
The COVID one?
Anyone, like CVS has nothing in the Boston area. So just like to whatever extent for our own school health and operations, it would be great to think about how we can think about how to schedule those for the community if we find that the ones we have are full.
Okay, I'll talk, and you're talking about COVID or flu or both?
Or both. I couldn't
Okay.
get anything scheduled at CVS, and I'm hoping to
Okay.
find somewhere that will do both. But if not, whatever we can be doing in the community.
Okay, I'll take that.
that.
If I could just add, Mariah, if you are of a certain age, there are plenty of openings for COVID at CVS right now. I know because I just got mine, and
Over 65.
yeah, I'm over 65, yeah. Yeah,
Sorry.
so of a certain age.
I'm glad that is true, and for the students in school and their parents, that's not accessible to them.
No, I know that, but just if we do have some seniors watching, I want them to know
Yes.
that it is available for them.
That's good. That's good.
All right, is there any new business? Seeing none, that concludes our meeting for tonight. Over a half hour early. This might be a record.
Good night, all.